This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we got a couple of them.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. This is LAR01's 2019 Facility Plan Meeting with State Construction Department, and I'll go ahead and have you guys introduce yourselves around the table.
I'll start. Good morning. My name is Brandon Finney. My role with the team is to work through the facility planning process. We identify the capital construction needs and then work with the district and the planning team. We identify budgets, present them to legislative bodies in anticipation for appropriation.
Judy Smith, Fire Meeting 1.
Dennis Hawker, Planning and Construction Office for Laramie 1.
Mike Peel, Planning and Construction Office, Laramie 1.
Brad Oberg, I'm Laramie 1 also, work on planning projects.
I'm Dal McComey, I'm Director for the State Construction Department, and as Brandon started off his role, my role is to kind of muck everything up once everybody works on it. So.
Michael Burnett, Project Manager in the Design and Construction Division of SFD.
Paul Severson, Design and Construction Administrator. I'm here today as support for Michael. I provide leadership to the project management group as well as coordination and calibration so that we provide equivalent services to all districts across the state.
Travis Hoff, Public Information Officer for the State Construction Department. Mostly I'm here to kind of just learn and get a good feel for what the department does so I can help communicate.
Amber Leach, and I'm the Policy Planning Coordinator. And my role during this process is to work with the districts, work with the documentation that we need for today's facility plan.
Good morning, guys. I'm Raj Dami. I'm the Accounting Analyst and AIM Assistant. Essentially, my role is to provide these guys with various types of information from the AIM database.
And if you want to introduce yourself.
Introduce myself. Shannon Furtick, I'm the Facilities Project Manager for the school district, so I will be implementing these projects.
Excellent.
Okay, Amber, that's it over there?
Yes.
All right, Troy Decker, I'm in planning. My job is to make sure we abide by all state statutes, rules, and regs in the facility planning process, make sure we capture and update all our data so that we can have accurate reports to the commission and to the select committee. And then I'm part of a budgetary team that makes recommendations to the commission for consideration. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start down through this. A couple things on the front end. Just want to confirm, Amber, you do see the screen okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. School district, I know you have quite a few documents, and so as we go down through here, I will attempt to bring those up. I think I put them in my Google Drive, or Amber did actually, and we can reference those. If you want to bring them up, great, and you just want to verbally reference them, we can do that as well. Just let me know which one. So with that, a couple things about these facility plans. Over the last decade or so, they've, I think, gotten better and better. They're very graphic, very visual. Periodically, not very often, but every once in a while, we do have the governor's office request a specific facility plan to look at it, or sometimes an individual legislator or so. So that does happen. Obviously, in school districts, we have turnover personnel. And so this is a great continuum of information that can be of great value to school districts. Sometimes we have the superintendent, business manager, and facilities director all in the same year leave, and a new crew come in. So this is a great tool to help those school districts year after year have consistency, know what has been talked about in the past, and how to go into the future. So with that, the other thing I think I want to say, I think I captured everybody who's present, so I think we've got that one down. Talking about visual, we do use Google Earth and just put in, now obviously, I mean, we'd have 40 some pictures if we did each of your individual schools, but we do use Google Earth quite a bit. We also use the county GIS sites, and we'll be talking about that in just a moment. So we just did your overall Cheyenne schools and then just did the 3 rural sites here. We also acknowledge you have other sites without school facilities on it, or perhaps not as, again, this is just illustrative, not totally complete, but illustrative. So this is more, hopefully my voice will survive, and if not, of course, Amber will take over. It's maybe more house cleaning than anything else, but the reason we have Amber helping you guys is so that we can get a lot of the database issues. We don't want to spend 20 people's time looking through a database and fixing the name of a site or something like that. So her work is important to make sure that we optimize as a group our discussion on those things which are really important as a group and not necessarily require just one or two people working on. So with that, a lot of things have been done in advance. So district, you have reviewed acreages and verify accuracy. That is checked. This does impact your groundskeeper allowances. Obviously, data from this database does go over to WDE, and they use it in the block grant calculation. So we take this very seriously, and that.
Uh-oh.
Troy, you still
Hold
there?
on.
Amber's gonna have to take over.
Amber's gonna have to take over.
Right.
Right, we're-
Your mic is not working.
You better, his voice gave out, one or the other.
I-
Hello.
Hey,
There
we
you are.
lost you 100%.
Okay, are you there now?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it goes, guys.
Hey,
I
Troy.
can always call in on number. Are you still there?
Yeah, we're here. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yep.
Hey, Troy, I like to go through, can you scroll up and look at, you have just the land ones? I like the undeveloped. Then down to the undeveloped.
Okay.
So, there we go. So the camp school storage, that's up by the bus facility, right? Okay, got it. Property storage, where's that one at? Outer House in Carlson, know that one. Southridge too, know that one.
Storage isn't that the one near the new Walmart area? That's the camp store.
Yeah, that's the camp
the
store. Okay. 20. Okay. Thanks, Troy.
You betcha. If you guys lose me again, just let me know. So the district recognizes there are differences in SFD reported acreages that reported by the district. They say that we have included a side-by-side comparison of attachment A. So let me see if I can bring that one up and guide me, school district, to which one that is.
Down to that one.
Acreages right here, attached acreages versus SFD. That looks right.
Sounds right.
Okay, so the district has provided comparisons from their site acreage to what SFD has. And then as you go down here, you can see basically the difference is that we have in the database about, give or take, what is that, like 14, 15, 16 more acres than they do with regard to our total acreages. So we appreciate you looking at that. In talking about that, I do read these, and we all read them. And then Dell and staff and district, you can chime in anytime on my notes, and this is a collective note-taking time. But I said SFD has referenced county assessor information to confirm acreages. It is recommended that the district work with the assessor's office to harmonize deeds and county assessor records. This method is used in order to verify data through a consistent source. We do take the county assessors as the final number there. Not to say that we don't make mistakes sometimes, so if there's something different between what we have and you have, we would recommend you going to the county assessor, making sure that you straighten the database.
Troy,
Okay, go ahead.
Let's have Troy call in.
this is Judy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
One of the things that we found out while we were going through this is we did make a call to the county assessor's office. Even if they receive updated, corrected information, they don't always update their database.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it's going to take a big effort on our part to go through each one of our properties to confirm the existing acreage. But everything that we have listed here is off of our titles or our warranty deeds. But we appreciate that we're being benefited from the state side.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have one consistent source of data and things, you know, the GIS, the county assessors always work. So like right here, Judy, we're high by 0.13.
Mhm.
So did you go through these and then look at your deeds and things? Is that what
Yes.
you're doing?
Yes.
Yeah, Judy, question for you, this is Dale. Is that just what this county does, or is that statewide? Because we're looking, you know,
Yeah,
the 48 districts
I can only
statewide.
speak for Laramie County. I don't
Okay.
know what,
Is there a
other
process to
counties.
go in and say, here's what our records show, it needs to be updated? Or do they just say, well, we just don't update it, we just work off of
yeah.
whatever, if
for
you go to sell it,
example,
you'd have it or something?
Like on the administration building complex, what we found is there were several street vacations that they never accounted for.
Okay, yep.
So, yeah, and we called, trying to remember the gentleman's name at the assessor's office. And he said, yes, they were vacated. However, the actual right-of-ways and all that were not recorded. So there's going to be a lot of cleanup that needs to take place on the county side. So what they suggested is that we get a list and give to them, but they can't guarantee when
Right.
the updates will take
So the
place.
same thing must happen with Laramie too.
Well, no, I was actually thinking, this is the common throughout the whole state. Some of the county assessors are paper, right? So,
Well, only one now.
I mean, yeah, so the variety is out there. The level of updating is varied. Some of them are right on it, some of them are slower. So I think overall, from a state perspective, at least we have a consistent database, and as we move forward, at least we can keep polishing it, you know, and always be improving.
And
Yeah.
another example is Clawson Elementary School. Back in the reorganization of the districts in 1968, Clawson Elementary School was actually showing ownership under Laramie 2. But it is actually, and has always been, well, since reorganization, under Laramie 1. So we had to involve our attorneys at that point and do a title search and go back to the transfer of ownership.
Why is Johnson off so much, Judy? It seems like if we could get that one, single one addressed, we'd have more than half of the error taken care of.
Yeah, 10 acres.
The only thing I can think too there, Brad, was on the, I think on that one, it showed that the right of way goes to where the greenway is at. Actually showed it there, but that's all city right of way.
Power line corridor.
Mhm. So,
So do you guys have an internal process to clean up, or is it you?
well, it's Chris Howe, and
Not high priority.
yeah, he does our
Sure.
GPS. We try to keep it updated every year, but
Well, we appreciate you guys pointing that out and difference. Like say, I guess right now it should we're showing and reporting a higher acreage than what you're showing. But you know, as you work through that, we'd appreciate you letting us know if you're getting them corrected, whether it's one or two at a time or whatever.
right.
So
That's something we'll be working on the next year. But another example is ARP, where we had it replatted because we purchased the Niobrara Energy Park property and had it replatted to the ARP.
To a company that
Mhm.
acquisition.
And this is what it says on the warranty deed and on the survey. But the assessor has this.
You also have Podera Academy on here. Is that in the total
Codair, no,
on theirs?
maybe on theirs, but not on ours.
House is on there.
It shouldn't count.
Okay, we ready to move on?
Yes.
No.
Okay, let's go on to land leases next.
That's fine.
So land leases are important. because by state statute, we're required to track those with each school district. So thank you for updating that, making sure we have correct ones. District land acquisition, you want to talk just a little bit about some potential land purchases and potential maybe requests for capital funding to do so. But talk to us about that a little bit.
Mr. Decker, real quick, while I got Judy, I'm sitting next to her to make sure I don't miss something. Can you go to Prairie Wind Land Lease?
Okay.
To the next page. There, at the very bottom. There you go.
Okay, so Judy, we need to do 4,600 for the 21-22 plan. Okay, so let's add that.
Do I
That's why I'm
need to
sitting
put
next
on
to
the
you.
work order for that?
We have a, yeah, we'll have, I'll
For
verbiage.
all of the, modular leases?
So let me put that one here. So that's, I just don't want to miss it, Troy.
No, no problem.
So that is for land lease.
And you said 4,600?
4,600, yeah, that's what I've got. So yeah, I put that for the 21-22 biennium.
And that just gets dumped in the project number, so that project essentially is gonna continue.
That's why I was hesitant on saying we need a work order, because it just keeps going
Keeps
insane,
going
so
into
that
that
you
same
know your
capital
total
project.
cost of ownership.
Okay.
Yeah. But I just, we tried getting the money as a whole check, and I'll put the same note in there and probably work with Judy to see if they'll make one
Because I
appropriation.
have been putting them on annually, and we don't need to do it.
The work order?
Yeah.
Let me put a note next to it. Discuss with JJ on work order. Okay, got it.
Okay. And we'll just list those as we go throughout the facility plan. So I appreciate you doing that, Brandon.
Add them to the budget sheet just so I can
You bet.
sit there so I don't miss something.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So back to potential and future school sites, district. What do you want to talk about with regard to that?
To continue to look for potential sites.
Okay. Are you asking for some capital funding in order to have it ready and prepared, or?
We don't have any sites identified at this point.
Or is that a result of the Mercer might show where we need land?
Yeah, this is Brad. I really think that the concentration, especially from the Mercer study, will show that it's going to be better to pick up a junior high, senior high site sooner than later. They're going to be expensive now and more expensive later, and it's just very, very difficult to find a site appropriately sized for a senior high. I think you've found that in other districts. And so I think the land always have a need, especially with some of the larger developments, for elementary land. A lot of the contractors coordinate with the district for that, but the high school is, I think, going to prove more difficult, and that's what we should be seeking out fairly quickly.
So like the Whitney Ranch one and the one out on the south side?
Grass.
Sweetgrass.
Sweetgrass, yeah. Have those developers contacted you about? Yeah. Are they gonna donate it?
I doubt it.
Oh, no, we.
Yeah.
Just a thought. I was thinking on Saddle Ridge too, they donated, but they didn't, it was 1.7, I remember.
So basically, the Mercer would complete, and then we'll know a capital request for land, and then there will be a capital request for purchase of.
Correct. I understand all that's down the road, but that would be my anticipation at this point.
Well, our budget has to be submitted when?
June, the commission, or July, our commission approves it, and August, it's off to SLOT.
So it's either prior to June or 2 years from now.
And I was thinking the cycle time. If you wait, we miss this slot, and you're out another year.
Well, you can take stuff to the legislature next year. Typically, that's a supplemental session, and the legislature doesn't like things unless they're emergency or whatever. But by state statute, the commission is to take stuff every year to the legislature. Now, what they do with it is a totally different animal. And there was quite a bit of discussion this year about building projects both on the state side and the school side even being submitted because it was a supplemental session. But I think some of the folks in the legislature do understand, and I pointed out in my testimony, that no, the statute says we take them every year. The commission is directed to do that every year by state statute. So it is different than typically what they look at for state agencies, where you don't take it unless it's an emergency or something that is unforeseen that you can't handle out of moving modification within your own budget. So that doesn't mean if the Mercer comes up and shows here's where we kind of need to be, that if the office do that next year, doesn't mean that the department can't submit that to the commission and then the commission take it to the governor. It's maybe a little less likely to get funded, but you never know. And they, for example, this year was a supplemental budget, and they funded everything that the commission moved forward in the budget this year. So
that's what I was thinking, Dale. We get the study done. We ask in the supplemental, the check would come in 2021. We have all the supporting documents of where, why, how, all that. You can buy in 2021.
right.
Okay. All right, so I think we've got that one down. I've also said AIM database at this point is updated. So I think we're good. Again, staff, district, if you see something I miss or whatever, have recommendations and notes, let me know. So districts, you've also reviewed property profiles and report and verify accuracy. Square footage does impact your major maintenance payments and WDE operations and maintenance payments as well. I think we have a note down here, district, that you may want to talk about as well. So I think we have another comparison for actual square footages. So let me go to, let me go to that. See if I can get that.
Should be attachment B.
Right there. I think it's this one right here.
No.
Yeah, square footages, right? That looks good. Just blow that up a little. All right, so the school district provided each facility their square footage that they've measured. I assume you guys have pretty well done that through CAD drawings, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and then the square footage recorded by us, which is through FEA through a process. So let's go down to the bottom here, and the ones in blue are, I'm going too fast. The ones in blue are just the variances between their measurements and ours.
Correct.
So they've shown that well. And then at the very bottom, once I get down there, hopefully it'll show. So the difference out of about 2.9 million is about 8,000 extra square feet between their measurements and ours district-wide. We giving credit for them a little over like 8,200 more than what they have through their CAD drawings.
Correct.
So here's our response to that one. AIM database has been updated to reflect the disposition of the above mentioned modulars, and the above report is up to date, by the way, and you guys mentioned these two. I'll just say that off top. And Amber did rerun the report. They're no longer in there, and they're no longer, obviously, the status is correct in the database. The second part here then is district has shown the FEA methodology. So let me show you that real quick. I think we have that, Amber, in there.
Should be, yes.
I assume you got that in there, Amber, is that correct? Yep, right here.
Yeah, it should be.
Yep, okay, so one of the things that we made sure with FEA is that we had a written procedure to make consistent for their measurements. And we don't have to read this whole thing, obviously, but it's just illustrative. Let me kind of break it down. It's illustrative of their methodologies as they go through, and they are instructed with different type of situations with regard to room types or room configurations physically, to be able to measure that and to be very consistent in their process. So that's all I wanted to show there. Nothing revelatory. It's just a methodology, and we're trying to be consistently applying that across state. So I've said here that the methodology is designed to provide reasonable accuracy at a cost that justifies the scope of services statewide. So last time we went out in 2016, it cost us, it was like 430 million, I'm sorry, 430,000 in 2016 to do all the measurements. If a district has architectural or in-house measurements, FEA square footages will most likely differ from building to building. Based on a spreadsheet provided by you guys, out of approximately 2.9 million, we have 8,199 square feet, more than you do, that we're reporting. Yesterday we were just looking at this and we thought, well, what is that percentage? So that's about 0.3% that represents off from what you have. Major maintenance payments are made based on, and you may or may not know this, but major maintenance payments are not based on building by building appropriations. They're actually wrapped up in a total school district allowable square footage, and then paid off that. So we acknowledge we're reporting a little over 8,000 more square feet for you, but from a monetary point of view, we believe that it's pretty accurate for accuracy, and that it's reasonable for expenditures for those appropriations. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Again, we appreciate the state's contribution there, but we just also wanted to make sure that we were upfront about the way that we do our measurements and how we account for our square footage. So
you bet. Well, thank you very much. And
anything, we recognize there's two different methods for measuring.
Troy, yeah. I think it's almost a justification, or it kind of proves what you're doing is very accurate. I think that's a good thing, but to be 0.3% off is amazing between the two systems, and we don't know that they didn't have some glitches when they built it, and yours may be closer than ours.
Yeah, I just looked at the numbers real quick, and I didn't see any real glaring busts anywhere. So.
Is it just a little here, a little there?
Yeah.
Right, and again, some of it.
The one school was the Prairie Wind was probably the only one that was the biggest that was on there.
So.
Minor detail.
The rest of it, some of them were basically the size of this table. I'm actually kind of amazed that those guys are built measuring, they're getting that close to what was strong.
Yeah.
Well, we do acknowledge that it's not a perfect methodology, but I think it is a blessing that we roll it up to a district-wide level, and I think in overall, I think it kind of cancels overages and underages and makes it pretty accurate. So we're pleased with that. But we appreciate the fact that you have architectural renderings and CAD and acknowledge that yours may be more accurate than ours, and we're not going to deny that or challenge that at all. So.
No, and we also just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we do review this and we do take it very seriously. So we're not just going to sign off on something, it's for the benefit of both of us.
Yeah, and what we could do, so let's kind of see if we can meet halfway in a way. And obviously we don't want to bring in and redo measurements, but maybe we can talk about this just a little bit between those two. Let me bring that back up. Whoops, that's not the right one. What do you think of this, Dell or Brandon or whoever? Let me kind of expand it so you can actually see it. We could perhaps, if we're like this building right here, you were talking about, we have 54, 490, they have 55, 186. Perhaps if we're in the next scope of services for FEA, perhaps if we're over a certain percentage of a building off, perhaps we could do that and come back. Now, obviously, guys, you're the only school district doing this, and so we wouldn't require everybody to do this by any means because they don't have their own measurement teams and CAD, specialists and stuff. But Dell or Brandon, what do you guys think about if we're off a certain percentage or something? We could come back and maybe just in the next scope of services at FEA, maybe do a remeasurement of ones that are shown to be off, or we could do all of them. But that way we're not just, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what's your opinion of that, and is it worth it?
My gut take, Troy, is that during the quality control process, when the consultant, whoever it is, reviews the final data with the district, that's the time to vet it. Now, this district's super sophisticated. Judy's got all this data. They can hole punch it, and then if there's something off, they can get it cleaned up. Because not every district's going to have this where we could do another column and say you're off a percentage and stuff.
Well, Troy, again, I think I really didn't see anything that was off terrible. The Prairie Wind one was off, I think, 4,000 square feet, and it's a newer building. Maybe that's something they could look at, but I don't know for 0.3% of 1% whether it's worth even doing it. Everybody acknowledges it, and again, there might be one or two districts, maybe just even on their newer buildings, might have some square footage, but a lot of districts don't have that. And I guess I'm kind of like what was said earlier. To me, I think with a couple million square foot of building out there, and you're that close, that it kind of, I think, speaks to that the systems are working however you do it. So
okay, all right.
Again, we just did that to show, the differences and not.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I think that's good.
Yeah, and it's a good check for us.
From a legislator, well, how do you know, how close is it, this kind of stuff? And to me, it's something we can come back and point, well, and LAR01, they've got a pretty sophisticated system. And when we come in, we check it, and, with the number of buildings, I don't know how many buildings are in this list that are totaled out. You average that out, we're off the size of one of these tables in the conference room on average, if you add up all the buildings. That's pretty darn close. So
okay. District, you've also reviewed building leases and verify accuracy. The square footages, if you have an approved educational program or other program, we're able to include that square footage within your calculations for major maintenance. So this is required by law, but it's also very important for your major maintenance payments. So we appreciate you doing that. We already talked about the fact that these have been disposed, and we've already updated that.
I was on these leases for a second, so I can work with Judy's for something. So what? Start at the top and run through their modulars.
We just have 5.
Okay, here we go.
ARP.
The 5R.
2 at ARP.
So ARP
601, 701.
Okay, ARP 601. ARP 701. Okay.
And then,
Okay, hold on there. And are you gonna? Okay, got it. So what's 601 mean? Is that a project number?
No, all of our, if you look on the building number list, that's how we identify them.
I
Because
gotcha.
in our system, we have to have a building number tied to our accounting.
Okay.
I guess maybe we should be using the FFP number if you'd like. So that would be your number 1101.
On your ARP 601.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ARP 601 dash. Okay, go ahead. 1101.
dash 004
Okay,
dash 0109.
got it. So lease,
Mm-hmm,
cost,
mm-hmm.
how much?
13,800
For right now.
Yeah.
We have requested the lease amounts from the vendor, and we have not received anything yet.
Yes.
Okay, and that's an annual,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so times 2 for, and I'll work with you to close it
Yes.
out, but 27,600, sorry. Okay, next, ARP 701.
And then it's 1101
1101,
004
04,
0110.
okay, so lease, cost,
Same.
27,600, got it. Next,
2 at Saddle Ridge,
Saddle Ridge, do you want to do number 1?
101.
Saddle Ridge, one word or two?
2.
Okay.
1101
Mm-hmm.
dash
046
046 dash,
0101.
got it. Lease, cost,
8 3.
And that was 2 modulars at Saddle Ridge, you said?
Yeah,
Yes.
those are the used units. Those are.
Okay.
84.
8,400.
No.
Brandon, I'm just waiting for you. I don't know when you want to move on.
Just a second. Judy and I'd just rather do this as we go through them than to miss them. And we can put it in the plan, so if I
Lease.
hit the lottery and go hunting full time, you guys got it.
It's a long-term lease, right?
Or Judy does, and gets off on her Harley and takes off.
How's that work?
I don't know, I'm gonna have to find it.
Okay, so we'll question that.
I was wondering.
Yeah, let's put a question mark. Okay, and then, Saddle Ridge 2, what's the number?
That's in, 101.
Okay,
Because it's the same numbers for that misplaced house.
How many modulars there?
We've
Just
got
2, because we
2.
returned 1.
So 2 modulars, okay?
So that's 046,
046,
0102.
102, okay. And we'll put a question mark on the dollars. Okay, so I've got ARP, Saddle Ridge.
So they have 6 total.
5.
I'm missing 1, so what's the last?
Sunrise, 101.
Sunrise, oh yeah. 101. Oh, sorry, 1101.
Saddle Ridge too.
Dash.
Base lease, and
That's
that's
43 dash.
There's one.
102.
ES has 2.
Hey, Troy, I think
Yes.
you're off on your note. And
that's a
I'm
good
listening to you guys, and I was catching the same thing. So you've got Saddle Ridge Elementary School, there's 2 modulars. There's not a Saddle Ridge number 2 with 1 modular.
Oh,
Take
that's
that
why I
out.
goofed up.
Yep, that's where you got confused. And then we have Sunrise with 1 modular still maintained. Because you got the second one. Win-win.
Is that it for modulars, Judy?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Before we
Yeah,
leave
we'll
that,
make sure we capture
yeah.
those.
let me ask the group this. You know, every biennium we come in, we ask for $4,600 for that land lease for Prairie. And I can understand at the point when we didn't have the school there and maybe you'd end up selling or trading or something. But now that we got a school on it, I wonder if it'd be worth a conversation, maybe with select committee or something, saying, hey, how about giving us 46,000 and be done with it for 10 bienniums or something? What's the length of your lease
We tried that.
with the
50 year.
school, but going back and doing that, so.
So what Judy and I did is we thought the same thing. And I
Uh-huh.
think Dennis and I went over to their office, we were doing what we're doing now. And so what we'll do is we can take the cost like we have here,
Yeah.
and then in our footnotes, we said in our site, our database,
Mhm.
and we'll run that same math and
Yeah.
and say, look, let's just maybe we can get it all and give
Yeah.
them, transfer the money, and it's done.
For
Yeah.
10 years or the whole?
For the whole
50?
thing.
It's a 50-year, right?
Yeah, and we thought the same thing. Everybody
Yeah.
thinks that too.
Yeah,
Are you outright buying it or
It's a
just?
lease.
it's a lease, but it,
Oh, it's
that we're
state
leasing.
land.
Yeah.
yeah, they're leasing it from the state. And again, I can understand maybe the legislature not wanting to get out ahead on land when you haven't developed it, because things change and maybe you trade land and do that. But now we got a multi-million-dollar school. I doubt we're gonna give up, you know, tens and tens of millions of dollars versus the lease. So again, I think that's a conversation we can have both in maybe this planning meeting coming up in May with the commission, as well as the first meeting with select committee and get their thoughts on it, because select committee writes their own bill and puts it together and try, because it's a 50-year lease. You've already had it for how long?
Open in 15.
Yeah, so you've got, what, 46 years we'd have, multiply that out, whatever the heck it would be, but maybe do it that. And if they don't want to go the whole thing, maybe at least do it part ways. So at least everybody in the room can be retired by before we come back and address it.
That's all right. I'll work with Judy and we'll get
Okay.
that number. It's about
Yeah, because
105,800.
The other thing that, this, in order to do this land lease, it's still tied to the capital project for the construction of the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can never close it out.
So you know the total cost of ownership of that project.
Yeah.
So we'll work together and
Okay.
I'll make sure we get it in the budget.
Yeah, at least, get the construction project part of it, maybe just assign the rest of it just
Move it
to
to,
land.
To be closing it out and be done
Yeah.
nice, neat, it's a
Owners
close
over
thing
it.
that you know the dot.
Because the lease dollars have to flow through that project number.
So I'll work on these numbers with you. So we've got, I just want to recap, Prairie Wind, we got ARP 601, ARP 701, South Ridge 1, South Ridge 2, Sunrise. So we're down to 5 leased modules. Okay, got it.
Okay, we're good, Brandon?
Yeah, Judy and I will tighten up a little bit of the numbers stuff.
Okay. Let me, District, let me not misrepresent you here, but this paragraph here is just talking about the modulars. I think there was a statement made and probably with the commission that there would be considered enhancements in the future. But what you're basically saying is, listen, we've got still capacity issues and we want to continue the leases, which is what we were just discussing. Is that an accurate summary?
Yes.
Okay. So basically I said we're up to date so far on the modulars we've already mentioned. I said the SFCD went back to restrict capacity of 16 students in grades K through 3, bringing the elementary capacity in the district to the following. So you guys in your K6 are 221 seats short, 103%. So based on the high capacity category, that's based on commission rules and regs, the possible options that exist are for leases to be extended or a new school, elementary school, to be requested to cover that extra 221 short seats. Is that accurate?
I think so.
Probably not or, you'd say and, correct? I mean, you want to continue your leases and I'm assuming you want to deal with this 221 and ask for new elementary. Is that appropriate to this one, or do you guys want to go through the MCR study and then ask based upon the findings of the study?
probably the Mercer study. I mean, one solution could be an addition to a school as opposed to building a brand new school.
Well, the other thing that would happen is if you ask for the new one, the commission's gonna say we need a Mercer study. So whether it's,
Before or after.
exactly, before.
Well, they've already done a Mercer study at the elementary level, and that's so I think we've got that somewhat covered. I know it's dated, but I think unless district, you guys just don't know where you'd want to put it in a triad, which triad, and we could postpone it for another year or two to ask for the design monies and so on. But anyway, just to throw it out that we have a previous study and does the district feel comfortable that it covered enough to say, and do you know your district well enough? And that's not to insult you, and I'm just asking the question, that a new elementary school or an additional elementary school could be placed without, in your opinion, a full-fledged study that's going to last a year.
Troy, I think that Michael's point was well taken. I think I'd prefer if you would take out new elementary school and put an elementary school construction remedy so that the Mercer push it out.
I mean, at Freedom Elementary, we did an addition, and for all we know, that's the solution here too.
So if it's a new school, fine, but if it's not a new school, it could still be a construction remedy. Because I think we're talking about construction remedy.
Now we can start.
No, it should be done.
So what's your take, Judy?
Well, we currently have the Mercer study in progress, and it's kind of looping the elementaries in with the secondaries. So I kind of like to see what they're coming up with.
Yeah. What's your timeline for trying to have that done, you know?
I'm not real sure.
Okay.
I don't think it's gonna hit this budget cycle.
Won't be done by July.
No, I don't anticipate it being done by July, and I think waiting 2 years to get a new elementary in the loop would be a mistake. I know it was needed in the last Mercer study, and I did just a quick review and identified about 3 locations that are in need of a new school, and then the district could sort through and decide which of those is the greatest need, and we could move forward with that. But I think just delaying it for further study, when we know how many seats are needed, we know where the need is, the district is moving forward with the 5-6, it's likely to go to a 5-6 so that they can free up space in another 4 or 5 elementary schools. I personally don't see any need to wait. I'm glad Dave just popped in at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think timing wise for the budget or whatever, if the district has an idea of where they want to head with the thing based on the Mercer study, because again, we would be required to look at a Mercer study. You guys are doing the Mercer study, depending on where you're at with the Mercer study. As a placeholder, something could go in there for the budget to be discussed both in the June when we present to the commission the proposed budget, or kind of where we're going to head for the final budget in July. Then there's always the chance, depending on how that goes one way or the other, is if we're not ready to say this is a school of this size and put dollars with it, then you have the opportunity through the select committee also through that process, which would run a little later, because we'll have our first meeting in June. They gave us a date for it. I don't remember what it is, but it's like the middle of June. And then maybe the 12th or something like that week. And then the select next meeting, I think, is in first part of September. And that's really where they really need the number, is that first part of September, because they're going to draft the bill so that they can have the bill in their October or November meeting time-wise to kind of, move that forward. So
would you imagine we'd be done with this Mercer by September?
All right, go ahead, Brad, or whoever.
Unless Dennis knows, I'd have to get a hold of Plan 1.
Yeah, I think, their big focus was to finish up Tetons, which obviously they presented at the last commission meeting, and then turn around and focus back on us. They were looking at more of a kind of a K-12 focus, just because that elementary enrollment's, going to push up and impact it. The other thought I had on this is, we do have a Mercer study that looked at K-6, prior to the changing of the methodology and then coming back to it. So you do have documentation of that. The other thing I would tell you is in May, we will be bringing additional academic and behavior data from Modulars to the board, again, to get their their blessing that, yeah, this is what we want to continue to
That
do.
the 5.6 works.
So, I mean, I agree with Brad. I think the best approach is you continue to look at that 5.6 because you do free up, for elementaries, on the back end.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Dave. I know you and I had talked over the last couple of years about the 5.6 plan, and that was your last one. So maybe dollars wise or something, we the department could be considering something along that line and see how that fits in to do a 5.6. Now, obviously devil's in the detail when it comes to explaining projects, and so we're going to have some kind of an idea that you want a 5.6, here's how big it's going to be, and then everybody's going to say, well, where's that going to be at?
Yeah.
All of that too. So,
well, I can tell you that, I mean, even the preliminary work with Plan 1, I think we can identify which of the 2 triads it would land. I mean, the one thing I'm hoping in the near future we get an impact statement, from the military to tell us that this big project, how it's going to impact us, because that obviously could change everything. But we are looking at the old carry to be our fallback for that if we get pushed. But I mean, I can tell you right now, we're pretty sure 1 of 2 locations. We already got the land in the inventory, so I mean, to put a placeholder in, and I mean, we can give you the details as you get closer, obviously.
well, that's what I'm saying. In our process, we want to kind of know which direction ultimately we might be heading, and as staff says, maybe it's a remodel and maybe it's some additional rooms or something versus a new school. But if we're going to put a placeholder in, I'd rather put something in for a new school than something for a couple of rooms, and then we got to turn around and modify it on the other end coming back through. So, budget wise, trying to meet what we need to get ready for the May meeting, which isn't very damn far away when you got to, have books printed and stuff ready, the planning process, and then you turn around and go to the June meeting, which is a couple weeks away with a budget to take to commission. I'd rather kind of have an idea of worst case scenario, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for what would be on the budget. A lot easier to take money away than add money in. So,
So Dave, would you like do you want to actually use a new 5.6 elementary or just new elementary school?
Well,
for the document, we could say a new elementary, but we could work
through it.
Work on the dollars for your 5.6.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine to go a little more general than specific. I mean, the benefit of the 5.6 is you free up capacity for 4 schools, not one. So I mean, it just, I think, helps everybody in the long run. But yeah, I'd find just if you want to use Metal Arc as the model, I guess.
Okay.
And then, so I'm gonna go to what are you putting in there? New 5.6?
No, I just put new elementary school. That's it.
Okay.
Made it, kept it generic.
And then since, just dollar wise, maybe I'm getting in the weeds too much here and going to take too much time, but dollar wise to put in, we've got the cost for Metal Arc, but we need to do something as far as inflationary costs. And then Dave, were there any things in Metal Arc that, not from a square footage standpoint per se, that we use in the calculator, but did you see costs or the change orders and things like that at the end of the day that would be different if you wanted to do a new K5?
No, we did some adjustments for security just because of the standards came out in between, but
Parking lot.
yeah, parking lot, yeah.
Well, we may, we've got new design standards that we're trying to move forward, and hopefully we'll be doing that in the next months, and within a year have those out. And those are going to have upgraded design standard or security standards and things like that, as well as additional environmental as far as insulation and things like that.
Do you know
more
if it
green
changes,
school.
does it change parking at all?
I don't know if it does or not. I don't think it
Well,
did.
and I think on that one, now that we've experienced what we have at Metal Arc, we probably would just choose to go in front of the commission and ask for an exception, because you don't think conceptually, I mean, it's an elementary school, right? But 5th and 6th, when you have 12 classrooms of 5th grade and you do your science fair for 5th grade,
Yeah.
the parking lot for an elementary school just doesn't cut it. So but I think coming up with the rationale and saying that, I mean, that to me, that's what the exception language is for.
Yeah.
We would just ask for it there.
Okay, if you can help us, Dave, with some of those numbers, we'll have the staff review it from what we actually ended up with a final cost on Metal Arc, and then, I don't know, throw our 4% or whatever in, but see what we got in that.
We've got that escalated number already established.
Yeah,
Okay.
so what I wrote down is new ES, quote, model like Modulars, design and construction, and then in the budget column, put Dennis, Judy, Michael, Penny.
Okay,
So we'll go to your office, we'll go through our
Hammered
exercise, and Judy pulls up data, and we're all pulling it all together.
okay.
One thought on that though is the location. You know, we bought the 1 point Salaridge 2. We had to spend 1.7, and then we had the money for the infrastructure. Thinking infrastructure, where might it be?
Might be another.
Well, depending if it is, so ARP, AFTERBA, both will need infrastructure. What about off of, like Hobbs?
Powder House?
Yeah, so on 3.
Okay.
Probably less at Powder House than the others. but
Yeah, you've got the land, but you'll need to put in your utilities and whatever curb cuts in the road.
And it's either gonna go south like AFTERBA or it would go Central Triad.
Now, did you have to bring in utilities and stuff at Metal Arc onto the side?
Yeah, we did.
I mean, they were down through there, so it still might be apples and apples.
Because we had to do a tap and everything.
Yeah.
We'll do we have a process. We'll get on over and rank away some numbers.
Well, when the district picks the location, each location, there's 3 different sizes the district's using for the 5-6. So we'll have that size and we can portion that out based on the allocated square footage too.
Okay.
So I think we
Brad.
come in really close.
Yeah, but I do think we need to be cognizant of development in both of those areas.
Dave, on it's just as the sizing goes for those and dollars, if it turns out it's not a 5-6 and it's an elementary, you pretty well, if it's an elementary on a K4 or whatever, or K6, dollars are probably still all roughly the same.
Yeah, I tell you, I think our elementaries are 21 classrooms and Metal Arc was 24, so 24 on a flex. So you're going to be pretty
right
close.
in there anyway.
Okay.
Should we use the same design capacity that's?
I would as a placeholder. I mean, keep in mind when you open that 5-6, your 4 feeder schools are going to drop slightly in capacity, but I mean, I'll tell you, Metal Arc's going to be full next year, 550. So, I mean,
550?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just copy that model.
Because you phase those kids in.
And by the way,
Well, they just
those
build
are
so much
identified, Troy, as an attachment to the work orders. There's the major maintenance and the capital that I uploaded to AIM, the list of projects. So the 5-6s and the future planned elementaries are in there.
Okay, do you see that, Amber? Did we get it in here?
The planned work orders
Go down
should be in Excel. Up at the top, Troy, first one down under the arrow, see it?
Right there.
Yep. Okay, those are the major maintenance, so click on the tab that says CC down at the bottom left. And if you scroll toward the end, you'll see the planned elementary schools and the planned 5-6 and the planned secondary schools.
What page number are you on, Judy?
That's under tab 3, following
Coffee or anything.
the work order spreadsheet. At the very,
What are these work orders?
I think it's about it, so.
for all.
All
Dave?
I'm good.
Okay, so looks like we've got the planned work orders all in line and ready then. Correct, Judy?
Yes, and I tried to update them. I took, I know that we did like the Davis, the Metal Arcs, the Prairie Wind. Well, Prairie Wind Land Lease is still in there.
Okay,
all
right.
You're right now.
thanks for pointing that out.
I'm gonna work over it.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yep, I think I got it.
Okay, so district reviewed enhancements and verify accuracy. Allowable square footage is important here, affects major maintenance payments. So thank you for doing that. This is a continual process of improvement. Okay, so so I think we made corrections to database. Okay, what do you want to say here, district? Go ahead and speak of what you're trying to portray here.
Troy, can we stop for a moment before we get into enhancements? Just for a minute. Dave made a comment that on land, and I don't want to get it too far down the road, talking about coal.
Yeah, land acquisition. So if we pass that,
Yeah,
apologize for my truancy. So if you look at the coal parcel, and obviously coal is, our goal at some point in time will be combine coal Hebert into one building on the coal site. And we've looked at, there's a parcel of land that the city owns to the south that we've had discussions for years about.
We Google Earth it?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Is that little rec center?
Yes, so we've been approached, Dennis and I were approached by the City Parks and Rec about 3 weeks ago. They are ready, they're thinking they're ready to get rid of it. So obviously, if that's the case, we feel like we need to jump on it to make sure when this school does come up, we're ready to go. So what I would say, we've just started conversations. We've actually brought somebody on to do an appraisal of that parcel. They actually just appraised it for the city about a year ago. But we also have them appraising the land east of Sunrise because there may be a potential land swap in there. So we're having both of those appraised for us to have those conversations. But yeah, so it'd be that just to the south.
That open little.
Is it this?
Yeah.
That whole, yep.
Right where your hand is,
O'Neill
Troy.
and between Bent and O'Neill, that block.
So
It's the whole thing, right?
Yes,
The
it'll be the
building and
whole-
the parking.
Essentially all this.
The whole thing, clear down
No,
to,
down.
clear down.
Oh, down
Yeah,
here.
the whole thing.
What's up with this little guy?
It is a city rec center right
It's the
now.
neighborhood facility. It has a little gym inside of it.
It's not in the best shape. But
Did
anyway,
we look at this here a couple years ago?
yes, it's been in our plan for a lot of years. But it's just that if we're gonna, the goal would be to surplus Hebert. A lot of those kids combined into that one side, so we're gonna get rid of 2 old.
So Brandon, is that adjacent to Land Fund then?
Yeah, go back to Google Earth when you're done typing, Troy. What's the plan with the facility that's on it?
Well, in the short term, to be honest with you, I probably would potentially look to put pre-K in it because we've got needs for pre-K in that part of town. But when it's time to pull the trigger, we would knock it down and put school there.
They also have several other parcels there that they're using as,
Yeah.
Okay, so first justification is
Well, the
design standards for your acreage, because you're only at 3.39, right?
Yeah, the coal parcel's undersized, it's also in the floodplain, so we're gonna have to work with the city. We wouldn't do a trade or a swap unless we had some things in writing there, because we know that there's some issues. Dennis, I'll let you carry from there.
Well, yeah, I think we'd want something in writing that we would be allowed to build on that site if we were to acquire it.
It's in a floodplain, though.
The whole thing is.
I think the rec center might be out of it, but I think the rest of it is not.
It's still in the hatch
In the
area.
hundred,
Yeah, I think everything else is.
Shallow wind.
Is
Well, the thing about it is, to the east, that used to be a trailer park. We think we might be able to get with them and
right
do
there.
some additional detention.
Isn't it still like just to the south of
gotcha,
that
yep.
end that he has his hand on?
It's over here.
A lot of that
Yeah, see where
was.
the green light goes through? Yeah, that's the street.
School.
And back in 1985, when we had the flood, the water was all the way up here at the standstill.
In here?
Yep. On that row right there. You couldn't even get across Skim Boulevard. It was all
Yeah,
the water.
both parcels are in part of the 100
And then
and
as it
all of it's in the
slopes down,
500.
You know, when you go to the Ames underpass,
Yeah.
that was just a lake. Yeah,
Yeah, the 100 comes right up to the edge of Cole,
yeah.
to the school.
Actually now it's in.
A 500-year event.
How much, Dave, how much do you think that's going to run?
You know what, we have it currently being appraised, so I mean, as soon as we get a copy, we'll push it back to you guys, but I'm hoping, you know, we've got, I don't know, 8 or 9 acres east of Sunrise that we're not gonna use. I'd like to get that liability off of ours and the state's books anyway. If we could do a swap, that would be preferable. We swapped some of that land for Goins, remember Civitan Park. The city uses it as a sled hill, and they've got some bike paths in there and whatnot, so, that's,
That one?
yeah.
Hey Troy, can you go to Google Earth and look at that one?
Go to Sunrise. So that's kind of our plan, is to throw that on the table, see if they're open. My gut instinct is they're looking for cash to replace this facility, but
They want to get that rec center built somehow.
yeah.
So is the idea this site then you would bring out of the floodplain? You'd
You would have to.
import
build up.
material?
Yeah, we would have to build up.
Okay.
Or increase the
Retention.
there on the east side.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Right here.
So,
What do
yeah,
you
if
do?
I can, so what we looked at, what we're actually having them, so we had traded, I think, Dennis, about.
We included the parking lot down there.
Yeah, so this all went to the city when we traded for Civitan Park and Goins. We've got all of this, so what we were having appraised is basically just this side of the sidewalk, this is our detention. See what that value is, and maybe we can get it swapped.
Got it.
But I do think if we can gain that other parcel, if we don't do that, we're gonna be looking for a completely new site for Cole Hebert. Obviously, we'd like to get off of Hebert with its proximity to the refinery and, you know, some of the other issues over there. In fact, I think the only thing on that parcel that's not in the floodplain is the building itself.
And there is no off-site parking.
Yeah.
No, it's on the street.
Yeah.
So when will you know if the land swap goes through? Because that's the easiest, is an exchange.
Well, that's, we have just started the conversation. Like I said, we told them we would need 2 appraisals, so we've reached out to a local person. They think they'll be done in 6 weeks, I think. And then the city was gonna also do one, and we'll just see where we land. So.
Be done by May?
I think it could be. Now, keep in mind, doing these kinds of things with the city, don't always go quick.
I was thinking of timing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the land, if the swap's not fair, then you need money to buy it.
Correct.
Because right now, we've only got 750 in the adjacent land opportunity fund.
Okay.
I don't know what that property's worth. Maybe you could do a swap and cash or
Yeah,
something if you're short, or.
Yeah. Well, we'll reach out to you guys when we get started. Make sure somebody from here is at the table with us. So.
So I'm gonna put down something about it though. That's good money.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys just continue to talk, I can get this done. Okay, that looks good, guys. Thanks for mentioning that, Dave, and it's good to backtrack and make sure we got it covered. All right, I'm going a little far here. All right, what else, District, do you want to talk about? This was under the enhancements portion, but what else do you want to talk about here?
Well, I think you have to recognize that existing buildings, which we have quite a few older buildings, and the efforts to preserve or asset preservation of those buildings does require a certain amount of modernization to make them still viable and usable with today's educational methods. So that means new lighting, new mechanical systems, and so on. We've done a number of renovations at a couple high schools and several elementaries over the years. So it's not that we're opposed to building all new and tearing down the old stuff, but the older buildings have to be viable to start with.
Okay. And I think you guys presented that pretty well in that concept in the last commission meeting.
So in moving forward and budgeting stuff, obviously because we're going to the quarterly payments with major maintenance, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do what we did at Buffalo Ridge moving forward, unless we just don't do a ton of major maintenance, to build something up. Is there a way to put something together to ask for, capital funding for asset preservation or something?
Component project, I guess.
Because it's a little more than just component projects, but really obviously there's rationale to what we did at Buffalo Ridge. You've added a solid 25, 30 years to it, but how do we carry that model?
One of the things that the department asked for this year for its interim studies, and I think I'm 101% sure we're going to have one, but I'm not 100% sure, is to address suitability and with the select committee this year. And one of the things that I'm looking at is how do we address a funding source based on suitability alone for these older schools, and how do we get them up to speed to where they need to be. So I think we'll probably see a couple of different items with the select committee. And again, I haven't seen it come out. The management council did assign studies for all the other agency stuff, but I haven't seen anything for select. And I've actually asked the chair what they're looking at for topics. And again, just my conversations during the session and stuff with them is that I think we'll be looking at a study on suitability. So what my thoughts are, Dave, and that's, obviously up to the committee on how they want to move forward, but I want to look at a couple of issues along that lines. One, how do we, the state, set up something to measure suitability statewide so we're consistent? And then number two is then how do we fund suitability for the districts? What does that look like in the future for projects, in those schools that are identified for that? So I think it's a little bit of a wait and see on how we do that for that suitability issue. Now on the quarterly payments, the thoughts from and just so everybody's aware, I did express my concerns. I can't lobby one way or the other, but I think you were in the meeting up at, was it Douglas or Buffalo or something, where I expressed my concerns on the quarterly payments just from the fact that the timing of when districts need to do the work, you need to get it done in a short time frame. And their thoughts were, well, you got to save up the money. And once you save kind of your money, then you can just move forward as you were in the future. And I expressed concerns on that, in that, the districts are saving up money right now to do some of their larger projects. So they do that. So now you're behind the 8 ball for your next year or 2 years, whatever that is, 3 years out to do the work. And so they did change. And so they're not making that effective, not this year, but it's another year out. But then we're still in the same situation.
Well, and that couples with the conversation we had in the last 2 meetings on emergency funding. So we're saving for
Right.
this project. Oh, you have money, take care of the emergency, so then those projects keep sliding.
And I think I think it may work out in the wash, but it's going to take a little bit of time. In that, one of the things, we got some heavy funding a couple of years ago, that 20 million for component projects, where we've been averaging like 5.5 a biennium. And then we've got a list that we'll be taking this year to the commission to see if they want to move some more component funding forward. So to me, and the legislature at the same time said, well, when are we going to not see these big lifts on component projects if we increase major maintenance? Well, there was, again, a bill to increase major maintenance this year, and it died in the Senate appropriations, but it didn't die based on the fact they didn't want to fund it. They didn't see a need for it. What they didn't see the need for was the fact that it wasn't going to take effect for about 2.5 years out from timing from when the session happened. And again, I explained to them, well, the reason that the select committee moved forward to increase the amount of major maintenance, and it was by, depending on your numbers, how you want to do it, 20-25%. It was to change that multiplier from the 2% to a 2.5%, was that, yes, the select committee knew, but they funded that the year before. They came up with a method to fund that additional major maintenance, but it doesn't take effect for the next biennium out. So they wanted to put that in there, get it done. So now the districts know that 1.5, 2 years out, how much money they will have, so you can plan what you want for your work. It isn't all of a sudden it gets dumped in your lap and then you didn't, have your planning process done to know what you want to work on. Well, apparently I wasn't very good at convincing them, because they killed it. But they said, well, we'll certainly entertain that when we get closer to when that needs to come up. So I'm hoping that you'll see that 2.5 kick in. And then during this time in between, I think there needs to be a discussion with the legislature on, you're wanting components to go away over time, yet because of some of how you're funding this, you're almost creating a need for some components in the future. And, maybe this year when we present on the component projects, if the commission moves that forward, I think they'll probably, submit some component projects again. We'll get asked that in select. We'll probably get asked that in the legislature. We can have this bigger, broader discussion.
Sure.
If you go on component thinking, going that way, you're still 2.5 years out in your budget process.
Yeah, and the issue is component funding gets to part of it. But like what we're doing at Dildine, we've got security, we've got component, we've got suitability.
Yeah.
And obviously with 25, 26 elementaries, when we just want to get in, be done, and move on to the next, not keep piecemealing. So,
right. Well, what I'm hoping, Dave, is that at the end of the day, we have something that will address suitability. We'll have that increase in major maintenance. You have your current major maintenance. You have security funding. Again, who knows where that's going to end up when we ask for more. The plan is to ask for more money for security in the future also, besides the 4.95 million or whatever the number was this year. And then they were given some flexibility with major maintenance on a couple of different, you can use 10% for your major maintenance on security also. So some of those things, if you have a project comes up, you want to address it, we can pull different pools of money together. And if there's something in between, maybe we ask for it. So I don't see anything there used to be, and Dave, you probably know what the right term, but there was like a minor cap.
Minor cap.
Yeah, years ago, and the legislature didn't like that, and they took that away. I don't see that probably coming back, but we'll see what happens at the end of the day.
It's too bad, it worked better in the component.
Well, the thing is, our mid-range buildings, I think component can address a lot of it, because they're fairly modern. Security is kind of an element. It's those older ones, like Dildine or Buffalo Ridge, where the office is in the middle of the building, so somebody's got to walk through a building to get the, and so that's not just a matter of, we've put A-phones on to kind of lock them down. But you still got John Q. Public tramping through a building, to get the, so I mean, that to address that, and then of course, typically you gotta add square footage a little bit, like a vestibule or something to handle it. And that, yeah, so it's like each one of these tools we have can't fully hit the mark because it butts up against something else. So I mean, if you know, we can go with you guys in front of the select, say, hey, there's a need for this other thing. There's a whole middle band of buildings out there across the state, I think, that you could address and give them.
And I'm willing to sit down with the districts and have that discussion and see where we want to go, you know, to throw out what my thoughts are. And again, I'll be discussing this at the May planning meeting with the commission, and the districts will be welcome to weigh in on that planning session. So it'd probably be good to have them there. But mine is that however, at the end of the day, they fund suitability. Obviously, our agency will be tracking that and have some responsibility to make sure it's approved. But I want to see it, and I hate to use the term block grant, but something along that lines, in that we build buildings. We're not, you know, recognizing how you educate students per se. That's more of a WDE function. So what I'd like to do is have it broke out, how whatever mechanism they break it out, you report back to us, but for you, the districts, to determine this is a suitability issue and I need to spend money on it. And then the other issue is you treat it like major maintenance, in that it's not a one-time fund. It's a yearly or a biannual appropriation that comes through. It'll be a standard funding thing, not we go ask for suitability money, kind of like the security money right now, that it's a funded component and that you can accrue it just like you do major maintenance. So if you want to save up some to be able to go do something for a major building versus, you know, painting or changing out carpet or whatever. And I guess I'm not even opposed if it comes down to wobbly chairs, because that helps, you know, on how you're teaching kids versus a wall or something. I'm not even going to fight that battle. I think suitability is kind of an animal of its own source. And, you know, you guys have done the study and done the presentations for us in the commission. And, you know, I've looked at some other stuff nationwide. And again, they're going to want accountability. They're going to want you guys to report out spending. They're going to want somebody to watch that. But I don't want to have to spend, and my project managers get into a big debate, is that suitable or not, you know, from an educational standpoint.
Yeah, and I do think if you guys pick the right instrument, it's going to drive it for you. And I'd be the first to tell you, I don't want to use you guys to buy wobble chairs. I'll do that out of my budget.
Right.
I mean, because I've got, you know, could specialize. We've got areas to do that, but I do think, and you're right, there's 2 or 3 instruments out that'll drive it to where it's not a mystery.
Right. Right. So I think if they do take on the study, and like I say, you know, I'm about 101% sure that will be a topic for select committee. Okay. On how we address that. I think everybody sitting around the table this next year going through that to either, hopefully, I'd like to see drive, at the end of the day, we drive some legislation on that. And again, it's up to the legislature to fund it one way or the other, or say yay or nay. But I'd like to see coming out of select that we have a mechanism to do that. And then at the end of the day, for the department also, because now you have some idea of what suitability is. Well, I've got to go out and determine that in school. So at the same time, what I'd like to do is be able to get funding out of the select committee and the legislature as far as recommendation moving forward, for us to have some money to hire a consultant to go out statewide and take a look at this issue and how does that hit all schools too. So, so that's kind of my goal for the summer. You know, it's not driving a stake in the ground immediately, but I think it's something, so everybody's aware, that's kind of where I'm pushing, where I want to head. So.
Okay, guys, I'm assuming you're reading my notes as we go, so I'm ready to move on. So the next one is district appropriations updates, and I've kind of really simplified this. Here's our list. District, you've made comments in your portion, and all I've done, guys, is highlighted down here to make it simple. Just highlighted the projects that are we do want to revert funds because they are complete. So confirm that, Judy, and if that's accurate, we can move on.
Okay, so hold on, Judy, are you going to do it? So 1074, revert.
Yes.
Okay, and the next one is 1084.
Yep.
1084 right there. got next? 85, okay, 87, okay.
89. 1092 we have to keep open because of the land lease.
89. So 1089 is where we stop? All right, got it. Okay.
Okay, Judy, did we miss anything? We're good?
Don't think so.
Okay. All right.
We're good.
Okay, do we need to take a 5-minute break, guys? We doing okay? You just want to get up as we go? What's your...
I took my break, so about 5 minutes ago.
I think, Troy, everybody's just sneaking out and coming back in.
Okay,
Dave's
good.
out,
Well,
just FYI.
no problem. This is just an explanation, I think, but Michael, why don't you lead us in the security portion here?
Yeah, so if you go scroll down a little bit, you will see that they've pretty aggressively moved through their security money. Budgeted not valid is only 65,000, and they still have a pretty high 10% amount that they could use. So then I think the question really for Mike Peel and Dennis and Judy and Shannon, how do you anticipate using those remaining funds?
Troy, if you pull up attachment C, security projects, we have the capital dollars and the 10% funds expended as of February 28th as an attachment.
So you've committed your 10% security also?
Not quite all of it, but you'll see on the attachments.
I have some projects currently that are coming out. 3 schools, Central, Anderson, with reconfiguring reception area, adding some storefront, and some security measures there.
Does it add any square footage?
No square footage. So we're using existing space and just modifying it to.
So your idea is to use this money out of the 65,000 or out of the 10%, 600?
Well, here's what I'm thinking there. That's probably going to have to come out of the 10% major maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have a few security projects coming forward that will come out of your capital security funds. And I think honestly we're about to the end of our budget allotment for that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask if it's there.
I mean, you've worked it all the way down to where they're like 60.
We have about $48,000 on the
of the 900 allotment.
Right, the 900,000 allotment.
We've done, and we're going back currently, filling in some holes in some areas that we have some issues. Yes. So we're trying to close those up, and I have about currently I'm thinking probably in the neighborhood of 7 small projects to do, and I'm trying to collect that information to
now, so in the past, you could use 10% of your major maintenance earmarked for security, and you could do new elements with that. But that's really just been a temporal thing in the past. That's not guaranteed that that's going to stay that way. So just keep that in mind.
It is in
so
mind,
if you
yes.
can use that money now before anyone changes their mind on it.
Well, from what I understand, we have, as far as 10% goes, we have a few dollars from the 17 budget, 18, and then this 19 budget has a 10%. Does that sound right, Judy?
Right, and if you look at attachment C, those are all accounted for.
Okay.
In there. And that's how we're going to keep reporting it as how it was expended in those years.
And then the other thing, and Paul Severson may have more of a comment on this, but that 4.9 million that's just come through, the commission needs to decide how they're going to deploy that in terms of what items. Is it the 1 through 20, or is it the selected 8 items?
Right. Yeah.
Do we know when they're going to do that?
We're going to bring it to them for discussion in May at their planning meeting. But the chances that they'll be able to act on it in May are probably not real good. I'm guessing they're going to send us back with some assignments, to try to clarify it for them so we can bring it to them in June And then
Yeah, I'd like to have it finished in June, Dave, so that July 1st, when the money's there, we can be rolling.
So we've got, we're taking an RFP for it on mass communication, which I talked to you at the last meeting. So the annual software cost on it's about 17 grand, but the hardware install,
Right.
pretty pricey, probably a couple $100,000, but it's, you know, district wide. So just kind of wanting them to get rolling.
I don't have it, you know, I don't think the commission's gonna have any strong reservations as far as not doing the 20 items and going, moving it forward, because that's the direction that we got from the commission to put it into the budget last time, and Select was on board with that. There was actually, the legislature actually then pushed it more, so it was only for those original 8 items, the new money, and the governor vetoed that sentence in there. So it came out that it can be used on any of the 20, but it did have then a whole paragraph or pretty lengthy discussion on the commission. It's still up to them, kind of like the first 8 priorities. They have to recognize that what's it going to be used for and take into account the highest priorities and this and that. But I think, you know, just from conversations that have already occurred, the commission's going to be pretty open as far as using it on those 20 elements.
Right.
So timing wise for us, obviously, we're going to try and get the software pushed out to the buildings so that we're ready to go, no matter what that entails. Is they'll be able to do lockdown from every machine in the building and notify. So the hardware portion of this, can we use 10%?
10%, yeah, you got to use 600 grand at 10%.
Other than these guys have done a really good job of spending major mayors.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then,
But we could maybe come, I guess, back in front of the commission when they've decided, and you think June they'll decide?
That's my hope. That's what George has already got something written up, and so we'll take that to the planning meeting, and you know, if they say, yeah, that's what we like, good to go, there may be the off chance that from the previous day before we could take that to them.
Sure.
But if there's modifications or whatever they want or some different verbiage in there, then we'd come back in the June meeting and as an action item and try and get it done in June.
really, and probably the only factor about that we have to get clarified with them is because it says money shall be first put towards highest priorities. And what we want to work with the commission is where's the flexibility that allows the district to identify those priorities, as opposed to we've already got studies that say here's the priority.
Yeah. And
so that's what we've got to work out with them. We're attempting to get the ability for you guys to identify and get approval of your priorities.
So approval would be going through the department and the DAO process, or are we gonna have to go in front of the commission for every?
No, it actually, yes, no, it will not have to go through the commission each time. It will be the DAO process.
So we can expedite it, I guess.
But the way the statutes stuff, it still has to come through basically the commissioner or the department for approval. But we're trying to do as much flexibility. The other thing that we're doing, Dave, and you may be aware of this, but we're rewriting how we're trying to have that a process happen. And we're looking at more of just a work order type of process. We've actually got the script and everything written, so you don't have to have 47 different descriptors on, you know, each item and that kind of stuff. And Sheridan too, Mathers has agreed to beta test that for us, and so we're looking at doing that. So hopefully we'll also streamline that process quite a bit.
And JJ's
The
pretty.
3 of us can testify to how restrictive this has been.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of labor.
Yeah.
On everybody.
Well, JJ's got confidence that he could roll it out. He's confident that it'll work.
Yeah, we run it in-house. We just want to go out in the real world and see what it does and get some comment from the district, come back, and then we'll roll it out. And hopefully it'll work and we won't get any glitches on it when it's out. But again, we want to have that done soon.
That's great.
Only last comment on this, and I'll be there in May, so I can surely address the commission if you want. But if you think about the fact your audits were done in 14, 15, somewhere in there, and the one element, mass notification, has morphed
Right.
enormously, just since Parkland. And so hopefully they don't rely on that original assessment as the priority.
Well, again, that's what the statute asks us to do. That's why
I
we're
know.
trying to establish this ability for you guys to say,
So if I
we
can
have a
help my
different
language on
priority
that,
and
whatever it is.
we would like to have our priority recognized.
Yeah.
The initial study even said in there that districts should have the ability to have flexibility. Because what you guys see as priorities doesn't necessarily match with what this assessment did. So there was even language in that study that acknowledged that we should have that flexibility.
Our intent is to give the districts as much flexibility as they can to address
Sure.
it.
And we can just have
And
a system.
this thing is just moving so fast that there are different firms that are jumping on board. But okay, great.
And the only other thing is, so our last security conference was in October, and we are planning on having at least one in 2019.
September 30th is technically what we're looking at, and it would be in Laramie at the Gateway Center at the university. Dell and I are going to be meeting with them in a couple of weeks to try to get this solidified. It'll be going along with the superintendent's S5S conference. So we would have a half day before they have their conference. And this year, our intent, and we haven't got this solidified yet, is to focus on the expertise we've got within the state, highlight some things that districts are doing that are being very successful so that we can, amongst the districts, get some collaboration.
It's kind of like
and
what's
coordination.
working and what's not working.
Right.
Yeah, the S5S asked me to speak, and I said, well, no, I'm gonna wait for you guys to take the lead.
Dave and I have already kind of talked about it, because I think particularly a large district may be helping some of the smaller districts, because one of the things, we're hearing smaller districts they don't have a big enough project, get anybody to look at, bid on their stuff. So is there things we can piggyback in? And my thoughts on this is we'll probably have 4 breakout sessions. What I want to do is have districts come in and actually talk about the issues that came up from the last meeting we have. How can we solve those internally in the state, not have an outside consultant come in and say, this is what you should be doing? Because we've had 3 or 4 or 5 of those already. How can we make things work in the state? And then update everybody on what the commission's going to do, hopefully in June or July, have the new system out with the work order and have all that going so we can get feedback on all those type of things. So. Okay.
That's about it. All right, Troy.
Okay, guys, we're going to go down to capacity next. So we have broken it out by triad. Dave, you request that on a yearly basis, which is fine. We're good with that. We always roll it up to a district-wide, but obviously elementary is 103% as of October, based on the October 1 enrollment. Charter schools, we're not required to actually deal with capacity charter schools, but we listed it anyway. Here's the rural schools. Junior high is about 80%, just short. So we've got about 600 seats available there. And then obviously the high school, you now have a planning study in motion. We probably should talk about, do we need to expand that planning motion? I know it was approved for 912. Do you guys have an interest in expanding that to a K-12? And if so, we probably ought to bring that in front of the commission and get permission. I think, Brandon, don't we have like 50,000 left in planning?
Yeah, we don't have much coin to expand though.
Well, but I would tell you in my conversation with Dan, they're willing to do it at whatever cost, because I think as they've got in with our initial conversations, they're like, dang, this is kind of a complicated problem. And it does, I believe it truly needs to be capable, because it does tie into the elementary rolling up to the junior high, and the junior high is being right sized for the high school. And we've had a couple conversations of, do you address the high school capacity and junior high simultaneously with some additions, or do you look for that fourth high school? What is because what they proposed to Teton, he thought he could come in and kind of throw that down in Cheyenne, and that
You saw it didn't go anywhere.
well, it just, how do you, how do you address district-wide capacity at 3 high schools phasing something in without doing an entire rewrite of boundaries?
That's what I'm afraid of, yeah.
And so anyway, I do think that with the little bit of money you have left, they would make it work. And I do think a K-12 gives everybody the full picture of where we are and where we're headed. And, yeah.
Well, you know, the 2 that we've already had, both the Jackson and then Fremont, you know, they were kind of looking at the tax center, but as part of what they went through, also looked at how that affects all their elementaries and on, to the point that they say, you know, if we continue to lose some students, they'll probably have to close down the elementary. And so I kind of like that longer term planning too, when you're looking at, you know, how you're making moves in the short term. So, you know, if we can make that work, Dave, I think that'd probably be okay.
So you're thinking a contract amendment to expand the scope, and then they kick them our crumbs and they do the rest pro bono?
I think they will.
Okay. So,
I mean, you've already got 2 elementary Mercer studies that you've done that they can tap into. You know, I've given them access to my brain trust over here, so I mean, right there, you got it, right?
There's your pro bono supplement, right? Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of the work's done, and I know they're gonna rely on, I mean, this extra piece over here, but I do think to wrap it all up so that you go in front of commission select or whatever, sometimes I think we get hung up because it's, well, you talk about the elementary, but not the junior high, you're talking about the high school, and it just seems they all tie together.
So we're gonna do an amendment, is there funding in there?
50.
There's just a little bit of money left in that account, so we'll do an amendment. One of the things actually Raj and I are doing right now is looking at reversions. So when we do reversions, one of the pros to this is money that comes through, I call them buckets. When there's a planning bucket, if there's money that was allotted and not spent all the way, we can put that back in the bucket, but it's not gonna be a dramatic amount. I can tell you that right now. So we'll work on that, and then we'll work on the amendment, present it to them.
So Brandon, do you want the district to make a formal request for that for the next meeting?
Do they need to go to the commission to expand it? Oh, yeah, they
Yeah,
will.
I think so.
So, yeah, so speaking of that, so Ryder, Judy, person, yeah, I'll work with Judy on it. So we'll do a commission request to use planning funds to expand the scope of services for the Laramie County Planning Study.
Well, if it's already approved and we do an amendment, why don't we just do an amendment?
Well, it's
because the money's in a bucket,
but it's also 912.
It's the source of funds, yeah. So the source of funds has to be commission approved before we can.
Is it action item or information?
It's an action item, yep. So it has to be an action item. We have to get approval so that we can move the money off of that account into the project. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't get super detailed in it. I guess what I'm saying is don't spend a lot of time, just send us a request, you know, and you could refer to this meeting, say, as per our annual meeting discussion, we'd like to do this and whatever, and then we can, because we're in concurrence, and that's kind of where we maybe want to go, so.
Okay. Put it on board.
Okay, thank you. I usually have a spreadsheet here, so guys, but no big deal. Or as in spreadsheet, as in a literal spreadsheet instead of an image of it. So, but we'll just roll with this. We do remove the elementary school or the rural schools out of this, and the Triumph High School. But anyway, and Dave and I've kind of worked through the past. But what we do is we go through 10 years of trailing data in the past sent by WDE, and we always do the enrollment projections 10 years into the future. So these enrollment projections are not used by us normally until some kind of capital request comes up. And then, of course, the rules and regs from the commission allow us to look at those projections, and then through a study or however we come up with the most cost-effective remedy recommendation to the commission, use those to help right-size buildings with regard to capacity if the capital request involves more student seats. So you guys, used to be up to about 1,100. you're down into, around 11 or 1,050 in the last 5 or so years. So that's just probably birth rates and a little bit of number of students coming in and out of the community. This year you're up about 100, a little over 100, 130 students. So that's good. You guys are just a slow, steady climb district-wide. So the other thing is that I guess we've already talked about this, but you've got your K-12 or your K-6 and the higher capacity, and then of course your 9-12, which we've already addressed with the study. And then I think you guys are providing here, and let me provide one clarification on the front end of this. You guys obviously are looking at projections, and these are based on mathematical computations. So obviously they're a methodology, and they're a consistent methodology applied across the state for consistency and for equitability, and we acknowledge that. But the great thing about planning studies is, and this is because of I think it was Select Committee with Phil Nicholas several years ago. He was drilling this with regard to Sweetwater 1, like what other external data you have other than enrollment projections, because we know the economy is changing because of the downturn in energy. So that we started kind of implementing that into the study. So we know that the school district has a lot, and we've talked to the city and the Air Force Base, and there's a lot of data out there, and we love bringing that stuff in because we want to see data that will help in remedies, and that's where it comes in. The data itself, outside of enrollment projections, does not move a district up on the priority list for funding. There are rules and regs and state statutes that are objective and establish the priority of funding requests. But what those additional data points do provide for us is the opportunity when you are prioritized to ask for appropriately sized facilities. Anyway, you guys have provided a huge amount of external data, which will be included in the most cost-effective remedy as we move forward. And you've provided a lot of information on that, and we respect that. And not only do we respect it, we expect that. We want to look at this data. We want to see holistically how it fits into the future of remedies for your district. And I think that it makes us, all of us, a lot more valid when we enter a meeting with a legislative committee and start asking for money based on most cost-effective remedy, that we've really broadened our horizons and looked at all the data to see what else should be considered when making a recommendation for capital funding. You guys have also provided, and this is kind of similar to what Teton County just did in different data points with regard to enrollment, and of course they did housing development and economic development, but you guys are showing the differences, I guess, in projection from one year to the next, and what that looks like, and we respect that as well.
Troy, if we could go back to that one quickly.
This one here, sure.
Yeah, and this leads to a little bit of my concern on maybe how the department does enrollment projections, because it's my understanding you use a 10-year fallback on your numbers, which ordinarily would help level things out and make them fairly standard. There'd be no quick moves, yet the lines, the colored lines shown are the SFD's last 4 years in projections. So there's something on the order of 1,700 student loss in the last 4 years projected. As you see, the student numbers are going up, and I guess it seems pretty extreme to me. The dashed line are my projections using just a direct rollover with yes, yeah, and
the
so
black one, right?
Yeah, so I am showing a decline, a small decline over the last 2 years, or the next 2 years, and then it levels out. My concern is if we have another even small decline over the next 2 years, your enrollment projections may drop another 500 kids as they have over the next 2 years, and you'll show we only need capacity for Yeah, yeah.
You guys are going to dry up and blow away, right?
Yeah, maybe 6,000 students, and when that's looked at by people, they say, well, why are we even discussing anything with this group? It just seems to me that whatever you're using is, if you're weighting current information or the most current years or something, it doesn't seem to jibe with what's been happening in the district, and it also seems to provide very large swings in the enrollment numbers, in the projections. So I was just concerned because as you know, Troy, when I do my reports and provide information, I like to use as much of the SFD's numbers as possible, just so we keep that consistency. But this is just such a broad swing, it concerns me. So
yeah,
let
me sure. Let me give you an example of a enrollment projection that went to 0 in the school district. Lingle Fort Laramie, agricultural community. So that agricultural community, we did an enrollment projection when we were looking at replacing their elementary, and literally 10 years out, it showed 0. Well, we know it's an agricultural community. And so I think the great thing about the rules and regs, SSC's rules and regs, is they really are sensitive to best available data. And so, you know, when you have and I would acknowledge right here that enrollment projections are great when you have this consistent trend of growth. And I think they're most accurate when that happens. But the shortfall on enrollment projections is when you have an up and down, you know, or a steady or a decline, or a steady, you know, a steady decline or a steady increase. And so we're very sensitive to that, and rules and regs address that. And so this is, and we acknowledge that the enrollment projections are a tool, only one tool of many that the commission is able to use and reference as these studies go on, that can really be common sense, I think. And then the other thing I'd say, and Dale, you can confirm or disconfirm this, but you know, the state is organized in such a way that it's more reactive than proactive. And I think the state has at times been burned by looking at trends that seem to point to a higher number of students or something, or dropping off of planet Earth, and then overreacting or trying to almost anticipate what that is. And then 5 years later, the economy has changed, something's changed, and we've either overbuilt or underbuilt. And so again, I think that we're trying to be the way the system is built up, because we do enrollment enrollment methodology. The way the system is built up is to be reactive in known data, for sure known data through WDE, and try to be proactive in the remedy based on that known data, including best available data. So I think we have a good balance, and I do not deny your observations, but I like to tell districts that this is only one data source among many that we will all use to come up with good, solid recommendations that we can all support to the commission. Dale, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, the only other thing I guess I'd add is that, you know, same thing, recognizing what we're seeing with swings, and in some cases we've got districts that when we built new buildings, I think we way overbuilt them because we were looking at the 5-year projection, and on the converse, we got, when they moved in, they were already full and didn't meet, you know, have room for a 5-year projection. So I've been kicking around with the staff just in discussions, is there maybe something that we can do to go back and look at the statutes as well as how we track this data in the future. And I was actually thinking about maybe working with UW or something and trying to come up with a better mousetrap. And I don't know if it would or not, but putting some dollars towards the study to figure out what we look at. Troy already mentioned it, but again, in Teton County, when we went up, Dave, I think you maybe this, you know, we actually went into hospitals and looked at what they're seeing for current and things like that normally doesn't happen. And that's why, you know, we brought it up, but I wanted to make sure in this discussion that we have with the commission and legislature that, you know, we've got this big unknown of how many people are going to come in with the base, for example. the housing starts. You guys have been good at bringing up. Teton County did, because they're even worse in Teton County. I've had the good fortune to work there since 1990, and they go along with nothing. And then finally, because of the politics, then it finally breaks open and they have this big housing boom that lasts for 2 or 3 years. And then it's another 15, 20 years before they can convince people they need to build more houses. And so there's really takes these dramatic swings. But, you know, out towards where I live in Fox Run, you know, there's that new 2,200. But it's over, you know, a 20-year time period. But then down south, we got them, and those developers aren't putting money into that unless they think there's something happening.
Right.
That maybe we don't take into account. So I think, as Troy said, we need to be able to say, here's the numbers, but here's the other stuff we know that's going on when we make that decision.
Yep. The process works great when you look at the statewide average, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just remembering though that when you look at the statewide and we are averaging everything, you're taking a community here that is very heavy in government.
Yeah.
You take Laramie, very heavy in education. You wrap it in with Gillette, very heavy in mining, and then agriculture. So when you look at the average, you still have each of these subgroups that do this.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is I know my time here, 8 out of 10 years, we've shown growth of 100 to 200 students. And the 2 years that we did drop, you know, was pretty minimal. So, yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think, you know, moving forward, we get a little more breathing room. I think we're going to be busier than hell this year because we've got the FCI we need to go back and look at the FCI scores on buildings, maybe doing something on suitability of buildings. You know, there's a couple different things we might want to be looking at in the building front alone, the studies. They're looking at a procurement study, and JC was their top thing on how do we procure. That's going to go cities, counties, states, schools, everybody. They want to take a look at every statute that's out there in joint appropriations. So we got a lot of big studies going, so we may not get to it this year. But again, I'm thinking about asking for some money in this budget so I can have maybe a study done. Is there a better way to find the data through UW or something? So,
Okay, Troy, I don't really want to go into the report, but we did provide a lot of other information that hopefully will be helpful too. I was even surprised with the housing starts over the last 5 years. There's been an average of 425 homes, but in 2018, there were, pardon?
I'm sorry.
There were 588 homes built. Sooner or later, that has to translate to students. So it's been amazing that we haven't gone up more than we have. But anyway, the other information that at least part of that we would present if the need arises has been incorporated into the report.
Yeah. The other thing that I think, you know, nobody knows how it's going to play out, but I think they're looking at building these houses, but so say the Minuteman 3 modernization, is that folks coming in and they still have their home and their, you know, their spouses and their kids are in Alabama and they're here for 1 or 2 years. Oil field, same way. You know, a lot of people come in, but they don't necessarily bring their families. So, but they need a place to stay. So you're seeing these, okay, I got a house. So is it, and that's one thing we found in Teton County, is that a projection of, they were using what I thought was a pretty low number for the number of children in a home for these new houses. They're looking, it was like 0.25 or something.
Right.
It wasn't even one extra person per household, where I've always kind of thought, well, you build a new house, it's 3-point-something people. They weren't even using that number up there based on what they've seen locally over the years. And I think that's going to be another issue here. Yeah, we've got we got more houses on the books to be built here than are in Lander, Wyoming, where I grew up. Right now, it's adding another Lander, Wyoming in the future. But how many kids are going to, you know, that's another, I have to figure that out based on what we're seeing is saying it's going to drive these economic trends.
Yeah, and we have done that also. We've taken subgroups within the city. So large apartment complexes, fourplexes, motor or the trailer park situation, and then different residential areas, and figured out the number of students. And it it is in Cheyenne in areas of 0.3, 0.4 per house. So it is lower than you'd actually think.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay.
Okay, couple more things and we'll move on. Plan 1 has hired a data analyst, and he did some really good work in Jackson. He didn't present to the commission, but that he is hired also for your study, and I think you're going to enjoy that tremendously because it does take in all the things you've listed here. It does take into account and actually look at it in comparison to the enrollment projection. So I think we're very supportive of that and think that's a good opportunity to see the future in a holistic fashion, looking at all data that may help determine remedies as well. And then the other thing, district, just want to make sure we've changed these planning studies in the last several years, and we are very, very we just don't hand it off and let districts go on their way. We're very active in the planning process. We want to join all your meetings. We'll bring Dell in and whoever the new administrator is eventually for school facilities division. We'll bring them in at key moments and bring them up to date. And Dell does a great job at that, asking questions, making recommendations. So as we go through the study, make sure you involve us the whole way. We'll involve you the whole way. And then there's no surprises. We're all looking at the same data. We're all discussing it. We're all brainstorming. And I think we're going to come out of this study very strong as a whole and hopefully unified with regard to the direction of where Laramie 1 can go with regard to requests and potential requests to the commission. So just a reminder for everybody to make sure that we work hard at scheduling meetings and involving everybody as much as possible. And that's why in that email this morning, I just mentioned to everybody, it's like, let's get these meetings scheduled well in advance so that we don't start losing key players and you don't start losing key players in the stakeholder involvement. Any questions on that? Okay. I just made a kind of a generic comment here, but please read these two, and if you have any recommendations other than that, we'll move on. Okay, I think we're all good. So charter school, we are meeting with your 2 charter schools this afternoon. I think Jed isn't there this morning, is that correct?
No, he's not.
All right, is he going to be in this afternoon's meetings?
I hope so.
As far as I know.
Me too. Okay. So that, yeah, it's really important. We really appreciate the business managers being part of those 2 Poder and Pass meetings, and hopefully we can see Jed there, and that way everybody's on the same page and we get the school district's understanding of where money's coming from leases and stuff like that. So here's just a approval, I think, of in board minutes of, I think, the charter schools. So Randy Poopert, of course, is the owner of those buildings. We've been working with him as well. I just said that a separate meeting will be this afternoon to address these issues. Any other comments on charter schools?
I think we're good.
Condition, obviously, we've all been around long enough to know that buildings age and preventative and routine maintenance are important throughout the lifespan of a building. Major maintenance, which is we're so happy about, that 7-year phase in through state statute was removed, so you guys can start generating major maintenance day 1. Well, I guess as we receive ADM and then start generating that. So that's a positive. And then, of course, we all recognize as buildings age and deferred maintenance becomes greater, there needs to be at some point toward as a building ages, a major capital infusion of monies or funds in order to remedy those deferred maintenance needs. I threw in the calculations so people could at least understand where in the heck a SCI score comes from. And then you guys, we have 2 different lists, according to the educational list, which represents about 450 buildings. And you guys have multiple buildings on the first page of that 450 building list, so we're anticipating addressing these issues in the future with regard to possible recommendations to the commission. And as you well know, that Dell was talking about the fact that we've got this new. Not new, I guess, just updated and used commission rules and regs that talks about 50% of a building score is condition, 35% is capacity, and 15% is education suitability. There are challenges related to that, and we're definitely moving forward with some data in the educational suitability side, because not all buildings in the that's 9 years old now. Of course, our condition assessment is fairly up to date. We're going to have another one coming up here in next year. And then the capacity numbers are, of course, right up to date because they're based on the latest data. So, but anyway, all that combines into a list. We'll see where we want to go, or where the commission and select committee and JAC and all those committees want to go with regard to recommendations in the future. Anything else you want to say on that, Dale?
I think that pretty well covers it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's ancillary buildings, and I don't think you had one on the top list here, and I can't remember. There's about 100 ancillary buildings we did across state condition assessments. But one thing, just to be aware of this, and you guys are already aware of it, the commission is statutorily responsible to prioritize education buildings above ancillary in recommendations. And of course, categorically or definitionally, all buildings are educational because they support the students within buildings. So we acknowledge that. But that's been what's happened. And so I would just tell districts, make sure you continue to take care of your buildings, your ancillary buildings at this time with major maintenance because we're uncertain when things are going to change economically in order to reach down farther down into the ancillary. Not to say that it won't happen. We're just uncertain when that will happen. And there's, of course, those component projects that can be addressed, ancillary buildings as well. You guys, this is just a list of your buildings from highest to lowest FCI, and that was represented on that statewide list. And here's the list, and your actual support buildings are really in pretty good shape, and so that's a blessing as well. Anything else, district, you want to talk about? I did make some notes, read those, but district, anything else you'd like to address on condition?
Well, just briefly, I guess I'm curious on the 2.7 on admin, knowing what's failed here just in the last 6 months, but I'm sure it'll get reassessed eventually. We've got some major plumbing corrosion.
I think when we're doing our study, right, with FEA, we're hitting ancillary buildings.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
It looks good from the outside. Just don't get behind the walls.
Admin will be 100 years old.
We're going to talk about the next assessment in just a minute here. So, but anyway, major maintenance. Thank you for updating statuses of work orders. That's just a house cleaning deal. You guys do run your requests, major maintenance requests, planned work orders through Michael, and I think he does a great job. Go ahead, Michael.
There's no current ones that will be processed.
I'm slow.
There's some coming.
There's some coming. That's exactly right.
Okay, great. You guys don't have 8% major maintenance left, so we're thankful for that. It's the same definition as 10%. You guys are very well aware that you can use on buildings and systems. They still have to qualify for the definition of major maintenance, but not necessarily in the inventory, such as teacherages and stuff that regular major maintenance can be spent on. So I think we're pretty good on that. This is just illustrative. I told you that sometimes the governor's office or legislators or whatever, or the next facilities manager for your district or superintendent, we don't know. But this is just illustrative for them historically. And for you guys, this is just last year's priorities from highest expenditures down to lowest expenditures, last year's priorities, and then a building by building breakdown. You don't have to defend your priorities or anything like that. Again, we're putting this in here as a visual illustration of last year's priorities for you guys. You can tell we went through that fairly quickly. So anything else on that that the district would like to say, other than the fact that we just said you're continuing to maintain your buildings with available major maintenance funds?
I think that's accurate.
Okay. Dave, you've been in enough committee meetings with legislators to know that periodically we have a individual legislator stand up and say, hey, are these districts spending their money on their lowest condition components and their highest needs because of deferred maintenance? And so we're not speaking on your behalf. I mean, yes, districts do that. Districts have to prioritize their own major maintenance. We respect that. And we trust that districts are doing that in a way that is informative and goes through their school board and for approval and stuff like that. So basically for us then, we just allow you guys to speak for yourselves. So we kind of did some drop-down menus on status for each of these ones or twos. This is a list of all your ones and twos in the district. And then a notes section if you want to add any more. That way, if anybody asks for us and it's like, what are they doing? We can just send this to them. They can look at it and you speak for yourself and represent your own needs. So I think that's pretty good on that one. Any other comments on the low condition scores? We have had comments like, you know, I'm not going to address unfinished stairs in a bus barn when I have other needs in an educational building, so I'm not going to address that. That's what this is for you guys to say that. So we know that there are exceptions to that, and just let you speak for yourself. Anything else you want to talk about your low condition scores?
I'd like to mention something about when we get these back, the descriptor in there under the surveyor's comments sometimes is not as clear as it needs to be, so we can address exactly what it is that they are concerned with. We found as we try to go through and put our list together on ones and twos, some of those descriptors are very vague. So we're trying to address, of course, and we got to prioritize those as well. But that descriptor, in my opinion, Troy, probably needs to be a little bit clearer from the surveyor standpoint.
It would help if they use the component number like B7103 or B1010 or B1020, whatever the case may be. We have a lot of from our very first assessment, a lot of work orders that were created just using the component descriptor. And then we found out through going through this process is that we've already created additional work orders, sometimes 2, 3, and 4 for the same thing, and the work's already been completed.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think, you know, not so much for my benefit, but for those that come after me, they're not going to recognize, well, this just says roof covering, you know, so, okay, we put a roof on it. It's done. Well, it may not be. You know, it may be something that was just addressed in a study, but the actual roofing not done. And one thing we found is, like on the security projects, the security doors and hardware, the hardware was replaced, but the doors were not. So I had to go and back off all of those door projects because they were not complete, only the hardware was.
Yeah.
But if it's components, I think that's going to help districts be more identify and actually address what is on there, the survey.
Great insights. So a couple things. Number one is you guys probably know we have an FCI report. You can get in there and actually look at it in the AIM database. That's for every building. And those FCI reports literally do identify the system by number. So that's one thing to answer your question. They describe the component itself, the rating, which is based on deferred maintenance, percentage of deferred maintenance, of course, and then it goes down to deferred maintenance and stuff and notes. So the other good thing about this, guys, is the consultants are not independent. They actually rely heavily when you code major maintenance work orders or major capital expenditures, and you send those in and stuff. We actually tie them to specific components, we run everything between 2016 and the next assessment will be ran and given to the assessment team so they know exactly how much money and which systems were actually money was spent on when they go into a building, which is a data source for them to say, oh, okay, got it, because, if you're doing HVAC or something, it's above the ceiling panels, they wouldn't know that. But because it's really important, obviously, and you guys do a good job of it, applying those in the appropriate components. And then I think, or work codes, I should say. And then the other thing is, this is where you guys come in play. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I've been saying this year with all the school districts. These surveyor notes, you can make, when they do the component or the condition assessments, they send every single assessment back through you. And it has all the notes, it has a score based on those notes. And you guys have total freedom to make recommendations on the notes if you and the notes are included within that review, because it's really important you do understand why the score is coming out as it is, and that's why the assessors make the notes. So you guys when you see notes, you want to make recommendations to improve those notes. You can run those back through FEA. They can consider those, and they may or may not change it, but you have voice in those notes. So make sure you fully participate in that process. And then the other thing I always tell districts, I know you guys do a great job at it, but it hasn't always been the case for all districts. You never hand the keys to a building. Number one is security now, but the fact is you never hand the keys to a building to assessors when they come on site and say, hey, at the end of the day, give them back. You shadow them the whole way through every single building for single assessment. And I think the accuracy is very much more accurate. So with all that, I would say it's a collaborative process. It's a team approach, and you guys have full voice in making any improvements, or if you see something in notes you don't understand, have FVA check it and make some clarifications. If you disagree with something in notes, ask them and make recommendations. And sometimes they don't change that because they're looking at a very specific methodology and how they do it consistently, but they'll always listen and they will make appropriate changes in order to impact the score. Does that answer your questions?
Okay, Troy, what I was referring to was on the low condition score report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you see how you have the surveyor column?
Mm-hmm.
So that just has the surveyor notes. It would be nice if we had the work code or type in there in addition to that, so that we're not having to go to this report, to the FEA report, or to the assessment to look back and forth.
So when you click on the code, it has, or the
Surveyor has another one there that has it, so it's more easily.
I gotcha.
Right.
I think when we were building this back when I started in 2016 to bring up the information in a digestible way for to be inserted, we already shrink it where you can't hardly see it anyway. Right. So we were trying to make sure we had something visual in the facility plan itself to be represented, knowing that we can go back.
On paper you can't anyway.
Right.
You have to pull it up on screen, but I mean, instead of having to go to 2 or 3 other sources to find your data, it'd be helpful if it was available to be pulled there. Yeah.
Hey, Amber, I think we can do it without changing the length of the width of it. Do you see that first column, district?
Mm-hmm.
We know this is Laramie 1, right? It's in a Laramie 1 facility plan. Why don't we change out the district and put in the component code?
Let me see what we can work with on that to try to.
Or maybe put the number over.
If you took the word where you have surveyor and the person's name,
that's
it says
where,
surveyor up above.
yeah,
right?
but if you click in that, that's where all
The
the
details,
definition, the details.
Right, what I'm saying though is you can
Put the component there instead of
shrink
surveyor.
Add
that
it there.
column and add the column where surveyor is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We can work
Okay.
with
If the code was there.
We always appreciate the comments and try to help us become better at this. So
It's hard for me to do. I can imagine what is hard for a smaller district to do.
No, it's a good point, which it'll bridge over some communication and knowledge.
You know, if the darn districts would get all that major maintenance stuff taken care of, we wouldn't have to worry about it.
Those darn guys that give us more money, we get it all done.
I do that. I call that exposing my soft underbelly. No, I'm gonna get a retort.
I think these guys got 3 million square feet. I don't think it's ever gonna be
We'll never get
a
done.
finished list.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, so Amber, you're going to capture that in our next year's recommendations, right, for facility plan to improve?
I will work towards it, and if not, for the next list we get, but yes, I will work towards trying to get something accomplished.
Right. No, I'm talking about our notes for improvements for next year on the Google Drive. Just make sure that gets in there.
Okay.
Okay, perfect, guys. Thanks. We're always trying to capture those things. Okay, guys, we will strive to improve and help you guys even more next year or year after, whenever that is. Here's how the deficiency percentages and how those scores are done. And I just put that in here again because there are people who don't know this, and it's just good information. So I think we've pretty well talked about the fact that we do have a assessment coming up. Every 4 years, state statute requires us to do so. And one thing I wanted to talk about, two things left on this since we already talked about the others. Number one is training districts is really important. So we always provide April 1st is just a mock date to back date to see when we need to start doing our scope development and stuff to go out for procurement. But in April of next year, we are going to train districts in Casper. We provide a 4-hour training session that goes through the tool, what the parts of the tool are, why, how they score, the value of your participation, all those things, how the tool and what the tool is used for and the outcome of that. It's only a 4-hour meeting to train districts, SFD staff, anybody who wants to show up. And so we will get you an invitation on that specific date, and we look forward to you guys attending, whoever attends. The next thing is we have had some school districts get a little bit concerned about the fact that we assess buildings during the year when students are in the buildings. But, you know, you have over 500 buildings in 2.5 months, and economically, I mean, we could do it, but it would cost more than $2.5 million. It would cost a lot more. And then, so what we do is we do kind of start in the spring before school's out, go through the summer, and kind of go into the fall. These assessors are trained to do very little interruption or the minimal interruption of educational learning within the buildings. So we apologize for that, but from a reality or I don't know the word I'm trying to say, practical point of view, we have to scoot into the end of 1 year and into the next year for school, and just do our best not to interrupt. Component projects, you guys did have one for DDC controls, 94,000. You're down at 15. I think Dell already talked about that we get average about $5.5 million each biennium for component projects. These obviously were prioritized, 31 of them for about $39 million by a committee made up of 12 school district representatives. This is a pending commission approval with regard to budgets. They could follow this verbatim right down the list. If they did, then we probably get maybe the first 4, maybe the first 3. After that, it kind of, based on average, comes a little more doubtful, but we'll see what the commission wants to do. And as we work with legislators, the governor's office on budget requests, we'll see where that goes. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, and we really appreciate public comment with regard to these component projects and the necessity of them. Every year we do have individual legislators every once in a while. It's like, I mean, there is a, you know, they want to get away from component, and I think they're striving to increase major maintenance and stuff like that. But these are important and acknowledge. The other thing we want to make sure is that districts know exactly where they are on the list. We've never done that in the past. So, you know, if you're there and you really want the East High School done DDC controls, you know exactly where you are on the list, and you can talk to your legislators. They're going to have to get that number up to 29 million, but that's between you and them. But it's certainly an opportunity.
Dave Brown,
what's that?
Sure. No. I was wondering if Dave was on the committee this year.
You guys uninvited me, voted me off. I don't know.
Probably Judy.
Oh, no.
Yeah, everybody, if you're within 1 or 2 years of retirement, you're automatically put on the list.
Oh, I must know I'm way off.
Yeah, that only leaves maybe 1 or 2 people in that room that have to be on the committee. So, Anyway, the next opportunity request is next year. We'll go through a 10.5, 11-month process for you guys to have plenty of time to do that. Brandon, why don't you start with and go through the legislative bills and stuff. You guys track really well on the education end, bills that may affect you during the session. We started just last year, and this is Brandon's suggestion, just started tracking other bills that may have an impact to you that may not necessarily, sometimes they are, but may not necessarily be covered under your education tracking. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Sure. So some of the bills, yeah, we've been working on these. House Bill 52 is the Public Works and Contract, which applies specifically to FF&E. So if you're doing procurement of FF&E, the architect would have to specify, or in this case you, materials provided from a Wyoming vendor. House Bill 65, procurement amendments. This is increasing the values in the statutes up to present value of today's dollars. You got your bonding that went up from 7,500 to 50,000. 80 procurements up to 50,000. It was in an SFC policy at 25. The 213110 was on 25,000 for construction bidding. It's now up to 50,000, and the advertisement of 2 weeks.
Did we get clarification if schools are exempt?
Yep. So we're having a meeting next week to find that out. So I'll get back to you on that one. Yep. So did you get an answer from your legal?
No, I have
people?
not heard back from them yet.
Okay. We have some discrepancies between House Bill 65 and Senate File 74. Yeah. So the next one is the quarterly payments. We talked about that. That's House Bill 78. Not this year, but takes effect next year. Senate House Bill 79 and school finance interfund loans. Foley's bonuses are dwindling down. Different appropriations or abilities to move money with the legislature through there. Civil work, House Bill 152, and the underground work. A lot of civil work was being, or utilities were being dug through. Changes the penalty from 500 to 5,000. You guys probably got some of that stuff coming up this year. Senate File 49, we got county zoning authority on private schools. The bill talks about having private schools have similar type facilities as public schools. Public records, which I'm sure you guys get those, is in Senate File 57, changing those requirements a little bit. Senate File 74 is the one that we're working on right now to get that stuff with the tiered system on the procurement. That'll probably take place on bill time based on legal review. House Bill 1 is the appropriations that came through. We got Sweetwater, the Satellite High School came through at about 17 and change. John C. Schiffer up in Sheridan came through at 8.8, an all school. There's a Modular, which is a reappropriation fund for rural schools. So that was appropriated. We have the Montessori charter school that's over in Albany County. As you guys know, the SFC has unanticipated. That was appropriated. The security projects that Paul and Michael spoke about, and that we're going to go to the commission in May on to discuss the commission's policy and how we'll spend that funds. And then major maintenance, when we did the calculation, the artist means never went up due to the cost of construction. And there's an increase in that for $1 million. So you'll see a small increase in your major maintenance check coming out. And then, as you're fully aware of the past charter school, at the end of this school year, it becomes eligible for the statute and successfully meets its 3 years. And the lease, we asked for that to comply with that requirement.
Yeah, one thing I want to just add in there on that unanticipated, I don't know if this is going to be a future trend, but it was kind of interesting. Based on the Satellite High School and John C. Schiffer, we asked for unanticipated like we do for all capital construction, but they didn't give us any capital or any unanticipated separate funding. What they did is reach back into prior year, fiscal years, and said, is there money available from the accounts from previous years? And said, okay, take it out of that. So there isn't like new money. They reached back in previous years and took money out of that.
You know, you think about it, Dave, that's sort of when we did the carry funding, and we were going through all these accounts of old money, first in, first out, and this is the second year that we're starting to do more of that. and it happened again this year.
So it's just a reallocation of existing money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they have it ratcheted down where they give you a checkbook, but you can only spend that for very certain specific things. What they're doing is going back to those old checkbooks and saying, hey.
Well, and then the other thing that they started, and this is why why we went and actually, there was one year we had no emergency money. And why we went and got the 5 million is because the commission had the authority to go back into unused money from previous bienniums that were left over from projects and stuff. They took that away. And then, so we had to go get specific money now for emergency funds, which they granted us based on historical spending. But at that same time that they did that, the reason that we couldn't go back is now, I think you're all aware, as we close out projects or things happen, they're wanting that money right away. And it's, I tell you, it's a monthly, if not almost a bi-weekly discussion with the Legislative Service Office about, have you got this closed out? Where are you at? What's going on? Send the money back, send the money back, send the money back. So we're under a lot of pressure to get things done, and they're watching very closely.
All right, district, you said basically there's not enough, I think, funds coming through. Did you want to address that anymore?
Just have to find some more money, Troy.
I'll tell you, we'd be happy to get more money. We're not opposed to that at all.
Yeah, I will say that I know Speaker Harshman and the House side has worked hard to come up with new funding mechanisms. And I had the discussion a little earlier about the funds that they did set up, and now it's available. Like 2 years, another year and a half out now. So they're working hard to do that. And in my conversations here just in the last month, 6 weeks with some of the folks, I think they're trying to identify new funding streams that will be more stable, which I think is a good thing. And one of the things that I'm going to be bringing up at the planning meeting, we talked about it with the commission at the last meeting. We've had a couple of discussions in past years, but coming up with a long-term planning document for the state, kind of like if you've heard me talk about it, the STIP program for WYDOT, which is their State Transportation Improvement Program, and where they delineate in a 6-year look of what's coming up with anticipation, but trying to break that out. And so we talked with the commission about that at the last meeting. They wanted to have a look at what that's going to look like. So I'm working with staff right now to not necessarily fill up the folders in between, but put in elements such as capacity, condition, all those sort of things, trends that we talked about earlier for all the districts, major maintenance, where we're sitting in, maybe have a category under major maintenance. So because we get asked quite often how much major maintenance goes to the statewide, how much goes to this district, how much, what's the needed backlog, which is determined in those FCI condition scores, what all that looks like, and put together something that then every year, the last year would fall off, the next year coming in would replace it. So we'd have almost a living document as we move forward for the legislature. And so again, at the planning meeting, we'll be talking about that and welcome any input from the districts on that. And I've talked with, again, legislators. They would like to, when I explained what I was wanting to do, they were very favorable towards that, would like to see something. And the reason that I loop this back around is that gives them a better idea for funding sources. What are we needing for more of a funding mechanism in the future? And ultimately where I'd like to go in the conversations that I've had with leadership in the legislature is, rather than having these bust boom cycles where we get 400 million, 600 million, and we create our own inflation because we got so many projects out there, and then the next year we go to 7 million and don't have anything, is if we can establish a funding stream where in the good years, maybe we're putting out 200 million, say in capital construction outside, you'd have a known and major maintenance, but maybe we have a program where we're trying to do 200 million a biennium for capital construction. And then when the money goes away because, the bottom falls out of the market, we've got an account, we've got some money in, we can continue to try and have a $200 million program. And then, you know, when you look at elementaries, that could build what, 4, 5, 6, 7 elementaries, maybe a junior high thrown in. If you get a big high school, like we talked about with you guys, if the high school's moving forward 80 million, at least we got a fund that comes across, and then maybe they can take some money out of a different account, add to that off situation for that year, but try and keep something more steady that allows the districts to look forward and say, okay, I've got my major maintenance money, how do I spend it? Because I know 3, 4 years out, we're looking at a program of perhaps something happening with these buildings, and whether it's component funding, whether it's, you know, whatever different type of funding mechanism to give you a better planning tool, as well as the legislature policymakers where the money's coming. And I know they're thinking maybe that's a better idea also to do something like that. So we'll see where that runs, but we're going to take that forward this year, both to the commission and hopefully the select committee, to get some feedback from them on that type of a document. So
we've seen a significant escalation in pricing, I can say. It's just kind of a contractor's market.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on every front, really.
Yeah.
Since when?
Well, probably been the last 3 years at least that I'm aware of.
And we're seeing significant reductions in price outstate from here.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, we've talked about it in-house, and I think down here we're seeing some prices that are a little higher, and I don't know if that's feedback off the Front Range down this way, where in other places in the state, the prices have actually gone down even as much as like 50%. So if you look at the component projects we had this last funding stream, we've added probably 8 or 9 projects to that weren't on the list to be funded. We're going down through that list because, for example, in Riverton, some of their roofs came in at 50% of what they had just a couple of years ago for price. So they were actually able to do like 2 roofs they had on that program instead of 1. And so it's kind of strange, you know, where you're at in the state right now. So.
And even you would have thought Jackson would have escalated prices. In relative terms, our pricing in Jackson has been pretty good.
Yeah, I think actually, if you can believe this, I think that new elementary we built in Jackson, square footage dollar wise, was as low or lower than what we had in Basin.
It was lower.
Yeah.
How much a square foot was it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So. Well. Again, if we could all figure that out, we'd be in a different job. Just make it the real dollars somewhere. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
So the biennial budget request, we talked about just the weighting of each building and condition, capacity, and suitability. And that'll become a public discussion eventually here, maybe as early as May. And then here's, guys, what I have so far for requests. Are we missing something with regard to the district's capital requests?
Judy and I are rolling through, so we got Prairie Land check, ARP 1, 2 there, check, South Ridge 2 there, check, Sunrise, check, New ES, good check, and Cole, Land Swap, and Brush Point. Yep, that's what I've got.
Do we have money in the accounts for Modulars for disposition? Buffalo Ridge, Payne, Dilbine?
Negatory.
Those aren't leased.
No, those are owned. Those will be surplused.
Well, the one at Payne's probably not going to be surplus. It's going to be bulldozed, let's be honest.
But we can use major maintenance.
Okay.
Dispose of it?
No.
Yeah, not the demo.
No,
So what
we had to
we
get capital funds for Campbell to get rid of all theirs.
Not if we sell them and
But
they.
the one at Payne.
Oh, yeah.
If we dispose of them, it's up to whoever takes them to
Sure.
demo them or do whatever.
Right. No, I would agree with that, but you can't use major maintenance to demolish a building.
But are you gonna, so Campbell, what they did, they had like 9 or so, and they got money, they hired a contractor, they got like a dozer, put it in the truck off. Are you gonna do that? Cause in that last year, we went and got the money.
We got 11 of them. Yeah,
Did
that we got
11,
rid
did
of.
a bed, good pack, and the whole 9 yards.
Thoughts
Cleaned
on
up the
Payne?
site, regraded it.
Because the last one we did at Payne, we did just pretty much haul off and.
There was 2 of them at Bain we hauled off and roll off.
Yeah.
I mean, Buffalo Ridge and Dillon are total surplus, and they can haul them off.
Oh, yeah. Still two.
Yeah, if they're more than a
Right.
decade
One
old,
will
you can't really
probably
can't find
make another year,
anybody
but I
who's
think
even interested in it.
Even
Reduce
two
two
sections,
sections, so I think
I
one-
one replaced, they were hauled off.
Unless they go out to a ranch someplace.
You know, we've found that we aren't even getting interest outstate in even those anymore. We used to.
Here's the
Somebody'd say,
problem,
oh, yeah,
is
we'll
they-
take
They
it.
no longer meet code. So you have energy code that no longer meets, they're just pretty much,
Right.
Are you gonna need the money, Dave, this
It'd be
next year
summer,
or?
next summer?
So-
We need to ask them how to get it.
Well, think about it, get back to us, let us know.
Shannon, I guess I'd ask you guys to figure out.
Yeah, when you guys are reviewing the plan, you just put a note in there for us.
Can we just go ahead and put a note in it for
Yeah,
a
which
placeholder?
Possible
Placeholder?
demo for Bain project.
Yeah.
LAR01.
Is it just Bain or is there any?
Yeah, the other two will surplus, and I mean, they're in good shape. I think.
Yeah, you know, you might have, Boyd or something bringing up superintendent's meeting, because we have had some districts getting money or getting modulars from other districts and just moving them around.
They
Themselves on the ones they
replaced,
own.
they replaced their rural modulars with newer ones. It's been
Now, the
happening
problem
quite a bit.
is these don't have restrooms in them, they're dry.
Oh,
So that,
Yeah.
one of them's already been moved once, and they don't move well. One of them
No.
might, but yeah, well,
dry
Well,
modulars.
didn't we
you don't
just have
find
a
much.
discussion with one of the districts? They're just wanting some modulars even just to store stuff in. And so,
Who's that?
yeah, I was trying to think, we had, because they were wanting to do move some students out of them and just use them for storage or something.
sound right?
I don't know, but anyway, that might be out there where it's not
Yeah,
necessarily a
Lane's Creek
student
is-
thing, but
is a suitable
use it for storage, so.
They're not
I'll
living.
make them a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
Come get it. You come get it, it's yours.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Brandon, just want to make sure that you clearly communicate with the district the timing of these last two. If they want it considered in the budget, we just need to make sure they know the drop dead date in order to get it in front of the commission. Otherwise, it'll just have to wait for the next year or the next biennium.
Yep, we've been working here next to each other. We got it planned.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, that's pretty well. I guess we're down to the very last thing: unique issues, ideas, concerns. Is there anything else the district would like to discuss that we haven't discussed already, or that you would like to say in addition before we end the meeting?
Tab 5, that report, was that touched on up in Gaston Hall?
Yeah, hold on just a second, Troy, on page 60, so I can finish
Yes,
reading that.
Well, this report was referred to, we did was actually the report on just Delline. So we didn't talk about the
Okay.
application, but
And those
Okay.
are also attached in the, we both
they're
voted.
in there. Dennis, so.
The report that Brad did and then the MGT report.
Mhm.
Okay.
The only thing I would share is I do have a concern with the 0.61 being your FCI for in need. Because I look at some of the buildings around that are far, far less than that, and they don't seem too suitable or stable to be schools. So just want to put that out there. But
Yeah, again, that's why I think you're seeing a change in where the department's looking with suitability and trying to take a look at that, recognizing that, your condition of your building, I think, is the condition of your building. And when you look at that now, the question that you've brought up is suitability within that. And that's why we're trying to address that with the legislature moving forward. So.
understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, guys. If staff, anything else on your end before we quit?
No, the only question I have, and again, I hope to get some clarification on, number one, what the topics for the select committee are going to be. I know we've got a June date. I think they may have given us a tentative date for August, but they did not give us a date for their final meeting. As soon as I find out what those are, I'll probably send out memo, a director's memo to the districts through the superintendents, business managers, facility
You said
managers.
select
Yeah,
June 10 and September 12.
right. And so but we don't have the final one. And again, I don't have what the topics are per se in there. As soon as I find that out, and that hopefully I'll know in the next week or 10 days what those will be. You may recall, I think the last 2 years, the select committee had in May a telephone conference call where they set up what those topics were. That might be the direction that they're going to head. And so anyway, as soon as we can, I'll send something out to districts and let you know where and when those meetings are going to happen and what the topics are.
So as to past form, I'm assuming you guys are doing DocuSign on this.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I'll
So-
be sending that.
Remember to send it to me first. And the last couple of years we've done meet approve, and then
Right.
to Boyd, since Boyd wasn't here, he's
Yeah.
gonna want me to do that anyway. So
Okay.
So I'll just
just
I'll
forward
send it to
me,
you
and
and then-
when I sign it, then I can keep forwarding. You guys are automatically
Yeah.
set up.
I had it set up so it would not go to them until you sign. So I will
My
remember.
current boss checks his email a little more than one. I didn't say that.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank
All right.
you.
That was a good meeting. Don't know
Thanks,
what-
everybody.
That went pretty good.
Thanks, Troy.
You betcha. Amber, you can shut it down.
Thanks for the permission.
So Judy and I are looking